I spent more than 30 hours this week researching every single player in every single game on every single team for week 11 fantasy football. Come take advantage of all that knowledge, all that research that's swimming around in my head today on today's live episode 46 of Inside the 20 by Basement Brood Fantasy Football. And now I got to find the thing. Man, it's been too long. I hope everybody's doing too well. I don't remember how to do this. Oh, there it is. Oh my God. Talk about being rusty. Talk about trying to kick the rust off. I wish I could do a take two, but man, once you press go live, you're live and there's nothing you can do about it. Took 2 weeks off and I have no idea how to work this thing anymore. StreamYard always trips me up. Tanner, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I know that wasn't smooth at all. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in, my friend. Happy Friday. So good to be back here for episode 46, another live episode of Ask Mikey Anything. I actually hate saying that. That sounds so conceited. Let's just call it Ask Me Anything. But really excited to be back. Took a couple weeks off, spent some time in Costa Rica. Beautiful country, by the way. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. I know I say that like you can just up and go like it's Target or Walmart. It's not that simple. But if you're ever trying to plan a trip, I highly recommend Costa Rica. It's definitely the most beautiful country that I've been to in the past couple of years, including, like, obviously we went to, Cancun and Punta Cana, Jamaica. Costa Rica was absolutely gorgeous, but super excited to be back. I had to rock the green and yellow Basement Brood fantasy football swag. Obviously it's Bears-Packers week. That's a big deal here in Wisconsin. So had to rock the green. It might get a little bit cold, or it might get a little bit warm down here. So I got the t-shirt underneath as well. We're ready to roll. Today's beer for episode 46 that we're going to crack open today is a hazelnut brown nectar from Rogue Brewing, which is up in Oregon. Quite frankly, I don't have a clue where this came from. I have no idea how it got into my fridge. I have no idea how it got into my house. No idea if it's any good. We recently had a Halloween party, and it cleared out our fridge. Like, we have nothing in our fridge right now. So I'm down to like whatever's in the back of the fridge. And apparently this hazelnut brown nectar from Rogue Brewing in Oregon. Again, no idea where it came from, but we're going to try it out here today. If you guys have any beer suggestions for the next episode, I'd love to hear it. I should probably set the stage for today and what we're going to do. I mentioned in that really rocky intro that I spend about 30 plus hours every single week researching fantasy football, researching every single player on every single team and every single game. And when I'm doing that, it's because I'm creating a resource that I create every week called the heat map, which is something that we're going to get into today to work through some of these start-sit dilemmas. Now, the whole point of today's show is to take all of that knowledge, 30 plus hours of research that's just swimming around up here, and help you conquer those difficult dilemmas, those difficult decisions that you're facing here in week 11. Most of it's probably going to be start-sit decisions. You can't decide who you want in, who you want out of your lineup. Hopefully you got off to a nice start after Thursday Night Football, although that game was not at all what it was supposed to be. It should have been a much higher scoring game, quite a snooze fest more than anything. But today, in this live episode 46, we are going to spend the next 60 minutes at a minimum, but lately they've been going 120 plus minutes, and I'm going to answer as many fantasy football questions as I possibly can. But again, first, we got to try out this hazelnut brown nectar from Rogue Brewing. Let's give it a shot here. I got my frosted Basement Brood fantasy football glass. Let's give it a shot. I don't know how I feel about a brown nectar at noon, but let's give it a shot. Oh, that nectar kicks in Oh, that's interesting. Hold on. I'm a fan. I probably wouldn't. It's probably, for me, it's more of like end of the night type of beer, like after dinner, after you've had several drinks and you got room for one more. It's an end of the night beer. It's not a noon on a Friday beer, but like I said, it's slim pickings right now. It's all we got. All right, let's dive into some of these questions. It was pretty cool logging in here and just seeing questions all over the place right away. So I'm going to do my best to get to as many of these as we can. I'm going to try and at least get to one per person at a minimum. We'll see. I don't know how it totally depends how many people end up hopping in here. But first question, at least as it shows up on my list, we got from Mr. Jacob Shockley. He wants to know, should we start Cedric Tillman, Drake London, or DK Metcalf? I mean, first of all, if you have this kind of a decision, congratulations. Like you're already winning. Things are already going quite well for you. Cedric Tillman is legitimately looking like a wide receiver 1 so far. We got a teeny tiny sample size that we're working off of, but man, the second he got opportunity, he started to absolutely smash. DK Metcalf's coming back off the injury. Drake London's been a high-powered wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 all year. Oh man, I'm already getting the beer burps from that beer. So this is a good problem to have. So without further ado, of course, let's hop into the... Whoa, hang on. Let's press pause. All right, hold on. I got to take a quick second to fix. That's actually super trippy. I got to take a quick second to fix this. In the meantime, how about a quick word from our sponsor? Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A forge master? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us. All right, there we go. That is significantly better. Man, we are really kicking the rust off here today. All right, guys, so we're going to get into the weekly heat map. I mentioned earlier that I spend 30 plus hours every single week researching every fantasy relevant player on every football team in every single game. And that is because I'm spending that time creating this bad boy, the weekly heat map. Now, let me find the best setting for this one. There we go. So what we're looking at here is a snapshot of basically every single game on the week 11 slate and every player that is relevant to fantasy football in all of these games. Okay. So the first question we'll start with number 1, Cedric Tillman. Okay. Now we're feeling pretty good about Cedric Tillman. We have him in the feel good column. If you're brand new to the heat map, I'll keep this super quick. If you've never seen the heat map, you're not familiar with what we're looking at. This is the resource that started this whole dream. This is the resource that went a little bit viral on Reddit. It kind of blew up a little bit. And ultimately it led to me quitting a decade-long ascending B2B sales career so that I could dive in and do this full time. This is something that's available to every single one of my subscribers. It contains contextual analysis for literally every single fantasy relevant player. Right now, you're looking at Cedric Tillman. If there's anybody else that's on your mind, anybody else that you're considering for your lineup, if you're looking for a plug and play quarterback, tight end, defense, kicker, whatever you're looking for, this is, I hate the term one-stop shop, but this is a one-stop shop to give you all of the information you could possibly want to make some of these difficult decisions. If you are interested, it is in my Patreon shop. You can get the just the week 11 heat map for $4.99, or if you want to get the entire season of heat maps or the rest of the season all the way through the Super Bowl, you can get all of them for $20.93. It comes out to $1.90 per heat map. That's about as close as I can get to giving it away for free without feeling like I'm losing all sense of pride. So there you go. I'm going to drop that link right here in the comments wherever you're watching. Feel free to scoop up, again, either the week 11 heat map or the entire season. But let's get into this thing. Cedric Tillman. Bottom line, we're treating Cedric Tillman, we're approaching him as a high-end wide receiver 3, if not a wide receiver 2 already. I mean, this dude is straight balling right off the bat. The game script is not necessarily anything to write home about, right? We got Browns at Saints, 44.5 point over under. That's just a sliver above average. That's a sliver above mediocre, if you will. It's either the Browns, they have a slightly subpar implied point total of 21.5 points. That's actually the 10th fewest among all 28 teams on the Week 10 slate. So we're expecting the Browns to score fewer than the majority of teams in the NFL. Not by much, but they are on the low half of the NFL, or at least they're expected to be on the low half of the NFL. There's really not a lot of reason to expect very many fantasy football fireworks out of Cleveland. Now, Cedric Tillman, of course, might be the lone exception to that. The Browns are 1.5 point underdogs. That's a very narrow spread. It suggests a neutral game script and a balanced offensive approach, right? Sometimes you see these massive game scripts where we can get an idea of whether or not a game is going to be particularly pass heavy or particularly run heavy. For example, you look at the Detroit Lions Jaguars game up here. The Lions are 13.5 point favorites. That's the highest spread differential that I've seen this year. And that definitely tells us, okay, this game is most likely going to be a blowout in favor of the Lions. We can expect the Lions' offensive game plan to be significantly run heavy as they're just trying to bleed out the clock in the second half, whereas the Jaguars are probably going to have to put the ball in the air 40, 50 times as they're trying to catch up to the Detroit Lions. Of course, that assumes the Jaguars care enough to actually try and win the game. That's something that could be debated. But this game, Brown Saints, very neutral game script. We should expect a typical offensive game plan from the Cleveland Browns. Now, Cedric Tillman himself, he's a third-round pick from 2023, came from Tennessee. He's averaging an eye-popping 21.5. Okay, that's wide receiver 1 numbers. 21.5 PPR points per game over his last 3 games, including 10.7 targets per game, which is nothing to cough at. 7 catches, 85 yards, and 1 touchdown per game. He's got 3 total already. Again, small sample size, but this dude is raking after 3 games. He caught 7 of 9 targets for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first game with Jameis Winston, who's willing to chuck the ball all over the place. He caught 6 targets. He caught 6 of 11 targets for 75 yards and 1 touchdown in his second game with Jameis Winston. He has 9 or more targets in all 3 games, 16 or more PPR points in all 3 games. This dude is there's not a wide receiver in football that's more on fire than Cedric Tillman is going into week 11. Small sample size, but this dude's on fire. Okay. Now we look at the matchup. It's mediocre. That's what the yellow dot is for. That's what the yellow dot tells us. There's nothing that's particularly exciting or scary about the matchup. The Saints traded away Marshawn Lattimore. Perhaps we could expect this to become a little bit better of a matchup as time goes on. But currently the New Orleans Saints are allowing the 10th most PPR points per game to enemy wide receivers, including the 5th most catches and the 5th most yards. Strangely enough, despite allowing the 5th most catches and 5th most yards, they are keeping wide receivers out of the end zone, holding them to the 5th fewest touchdowns in football. Now, of course, you can bring math into this. You can bring touchdown regression into this, right? If the Saints are allowing 12.9 catches per game, 165.4 yards per game from wide receivers, but just 0.6 touchdowns, think about a wide receiver in football. If you have one wide receiver that has 13 catches and 165 yards in a game, they probably have a touchdown, more likely than not. So if you think mathematically, okay, if the Saints are allowing a ton of catches and a lot of yards, but they're not allowing touchdowns, sooner or later, those levers are going to start to even out, right? So the Saints defense could find themselves on the wrong end of touchdown regression sooner than later. And again, they did just trade Marshawn Lattimore. That said, if we dig down into the individual level, the New Orleans Saints, just 5 wide receivers in 10 games have been able to reach 15 or more PPR points against the New Orleans Saints. CeeDee Lamb, Juju Smith-Schuster, these are all the guys that notable wide receivers that hit against New Orleans, and these are all the guys that missed, that should have done better. They fell below expectations against New Orleans. So ultimately, we're feeling good about Cedric Tillman. There's not really we feel good about Cedric Tillman. There's not a reason to be scared of the matchup. There's not a reason to be scared of the game script either. We feel good about him just in general. But, Jacob, you have a lot of options here, right? We're also looking at Drake London and DK Metcalf. We're not talking about a bunch of flex flex borderline type of players. We're talking about like high-end wide receiver twos, and I'm guessing you're only trying to pick one here. So the next one on the list, or at least in here, is Drake London. We're going to find Atlanta here. Falcons play against the Denver Broncos. That's game number 11. Drake London is all the way down here. So we have him in the same column as Cedric Tillman, the B column, the feel-good column. We do have him with a yellow dot, and that's usually because it's a great player, but in a difficult matchup, which we'll get to in a minute. Bottom line, we're approaching Drake London as a quality wide receiver too, but this is a brutal matchup against Pat Surtain and the Denver Broncos. So there is reason to temper your expectations a little bit, right? Typically, this is a guy that you put in your lineup every single week, but this could be a little bit slower sledding against a difficult matchup. Now, the game script itself, it's yellow. It's mediocre. It's not anything to be excited about. It's not anything to be scared of. It's just kind of blah. It's right in the middle. 44.5 point over under, which is either tied for the 7th highest or 6th fewest, depending on if you feel like being optimistic or pessimistic about the over under. Now, the Falcons have a subpar implied point total of 21 points. So like the Browns, are expected to be in the bottom half of scoring this week. They're actually tied for the 8th lowest implied point total of all 28 teams. But again, they're narrow 2.5 point underdogs. We're expecting a neutral game script. If anything, they're 2.5 point underdogs, meaning they could find themselves in a negative game script, which typically means pass heavy approach. Still, this is 2.5 isn't wide enough to really start considering run heavy or pass heavy. Now, Drake London himself, he's balling, right? 16.5 PPR points per game. He's getting nearly 9 targets per game, 6 catches, 69 very nice yards. He scored 17 or more PPR points in 6 of 9. Very nice games. He had an explosion of 33.4 points in week 5, but there's a little bit of bust to Drake London's game. He did score fewer than 13 PPR points in the other 3 games, including 7.4 in week 8, 3.5 in week 1. So there's some bust there, but it's not very frequent. He's hitting more than he's missing for sure. Now, the matchup itself is difficult. The Denver Broncos are absolutely suffocating wide receivers. They're holding them to the 4th fewest PPR points per game, 10th fewest catches, 5th fewest yards, 5th fewest touchdowns. Just 10 wide receivers in 10 games have been able to muster up even just 10 PPR points against the Broncos. Like, that might sound like a lot. Oh, that's 1 per game, but we're talking about 10 PPR points. We're talking about 5 catches and 50 yards. You're going to want more than that from Drake London. And yet only 10 wide receivers all season have been able to get to 10 PPR points against the Denver Broncos. Just 4 of them were able to get to even just 14 PPR points. And if you're starting Drake London, you're hoping for about 15 or more. As you can see here, there's a lot more noteworthy names on the missed list than the hit list. Right? The names that did hit were Chris Godwin, RIP. Then you got Cedric Wilson, who had a good game against the Broncos. Jalen Coker, who had a great game against the Broncos. And then Zay Flowers. But DK Metcalf, JSN, George Pickens, Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, Chargers wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, all of those guys missed when they came up against Denver. Right? We like Drake London a lot. We don't love that the way this game sets up for him in the matchup that he's going to run into. Not to mention, by the way, that he's dealing with a hip injury that he's not a significant risk for re-injury, but it's not a good thing that the guy's dealing with a hip injury. Last but not least, we got Mr. DK Metcalf. Now, this one's going to be fun. Stick with me here. I remember digging into this one. DK Metcalf. Bottom line, he should get plenty of volume. The Seahawks are going to be pressed into a pass-heavy game script. He should get plenty of volume, but it's also a tough matchup. And by the way, it's one that he's struggled with big time in the past. I'm treating him as a boom or bust wide receiver too. Now, the game itself, it's got a strong over-under, 48.5 points. That suggests a little bit of shootout, some shootout potential if the Seahawks are able to exceed their expectations. And what I mean by that is that they have a subpar implied total, just 21 points. They're supposed to be in the bottom half, tied for the 8th fewest among all 28 teams. But if they can exceed expectations a little bit, this game has a over under 48.5, and it has some shootout potential. And indeed, when these two teams played each other in week 6, they totaled 60 points. The 49ers won that game 36-24. So there's some high scoring appeal to this game in general. And then when you look at the Seahawks, they're 6.5 point road underdogs. And that's a wide enough spread to suggest not necessarily a blowout loss, but a game where they're going to be playing from behind against the San Francisco 49ers. And typically when an NFL team is playing from behind, they have to put the ball in the air more than they might usually, right? The Seahawks, typically speaking, they want to feed Kenneth Walker as much as they can, but they might not have that opportunity. They might have to throw the ball, and that's good for Seahawks pass catchers, but it might come at the expense of rushing volume for guys like Kenneth Walker. Now, DK Metcalf himself, 15.7 PPR points per game. He's typically boom or bust, including he's typically boom or bust. He scored 17 or more PPR points in 4 of 7 games, but he also scored fewer than 10 points in 3 of 7 games. Okay. So he's either hitting or missing. There's not really an in-between with DK Metcalf. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. His career against San Francisco with Geno Smith at quarterback, not pretty. He scored, for starters, in week 6, he scored just 7.8 PPR points against the Niners. His second worst game of this year, he had 11 targets, but he caught just 3 of them for 48 scoreless yards. He entered this season averaging just 8.7 PPR points per game over 3 career games against the 49ers, where Geno Smith is his quarterback. He scored a quote unquote high against the 49ers of 12.5. Okay. That's his high against the 49ers since 2022 with Geno Smith at quarterback. And he has 3 games now, under 8 PPR points against the 49ers. I don't like to put too much stock into historical performances because ultimately they don't, yes, history repeats itself, but it doesn't tell the full story of what to expect in the upcoming week. But history is definitely not on DK Metcalf's side in this particular matchup. And the 49ers in general are good against wide receivers. They're holding them to the 9th fewest PPR points per game, including the 5th fewest catches, 9th fewest yards, 11th fewest touchdowns. Just 4 wide receivers in 9 games have been able to reach 15 PPR points against the 49ers. So not even half a wide receiver per game is getting to 15 PPR points. Now, you can see they didn't really play any murderer's row. They didn't really play a murderer's row of wide receivers. The only notable misses on this list are Marvin Harrison, but also DK Metcalf himself. So it's one of the Drake London and DK Metcalf are guys that I want to have in my lineup as frequently as I possibly can. But there's just no way to feel particularly good about them in this week in particular, just given their matchups. It's one of those things where it's like you start them if you got them, but if you're stuck in a really tough situation like this, Jacob, I don't know, man. I want to be like, this is the hard part as a fantasy football analyst, where it's like, I want to tell you to go with Drake London because it feels so much safer. Like, okay, we know Drake London's going to get 8, 9, 10 targets. Let's go that route. I can't tell this guy to go with Cedric Tillman because he's still brand new. We don't know if this is a fluke. We don't know if this is just a phase. But man, I got to tell you, if it's me in this situation and I'm trying to make this decision, Falcons, Broncos, I don't love that game. Seahawks, 49ers, don't love that game. If it's me and I'm trying to make this, if this is me in my league, I'm going to Cedric Tillman. There, I said it. I don't want to say it. I want to tell you the easy route. But if it's me, if it was my league, I'm going with Cedric Tillman. Bam. Hope that helps. Yeah, and like Aaron says here, Jameis revenge game. I love it, man. And if there's any quarterback in the world that's willing to fling it all over the place, it's Jameis. And we know that. We've seen it, okay? I mean, you want to start Drake London, you want to start DK Metcalf, they're getting a ton of volume, but Cedric Tillman's getting more volume than both of those guys. It's wild. It's going to feel super uncomfortable, but that's the route I would go. Hope that helps. All right. I know that was a lengthy one. And guys, by the way, if you're looking for a quick hit show, like here's my options, what's your answer? This isn't the show. You should just tune out. It's not going to happen. Like if I'm going to answer these questions as if it's my own league, which is the whole point of this show, then I'm going to go through my process. And it's going to take time. That's just the way this works. So if this is taking too long per thing, feel free to tune out. It's not going to be your kind of show. But if you want to dig into the data, if you want to see the decision-making process, if you want to see the sausage being made, gross, absolutely stay tuned, okay? Let's hop over to the next one, but I do have a quick favor to ask you guys. The NFL draft is coming to Green Bay. It's coming to Wisconsin in 2025, and the Dan Patrick Show is They announced yesterday that they're looking for somebody to host. They're looking for a host for their show while they are in town for the NFL draft. And today, shooters got to shoot. I shot my shot on Twitter, and I called the line. It rang forever. I literally tried calling for like 30 minutes, didn't get through. It's fine, no worries. I'm gonna send an email later, but I would love nothing more than to host these guys. Obviously, I'd love to be on their show, but even if they don't want me on their show, like I'll bring these dudes buffalo wings and beers. But I would love to connect with them while they're in town. If you have a minute, if you're cool with it, I have this tweet. If you don't mind engaging with it, I don't know if we want to talk about retweets or commenting or whatever, but I'm just trying to get these guys' attention as much as I can. So, and while you're here, give me a follow. I wouldn't mind that either. So anyway, if you're up for it, do it. If not, that's cool. No worries. All right, let's jump to the next one. Ido OBJ has a lot of questions for me. Let me pick one to start with, and maybe we'll come back. So just, oh, I love this. He says, I do OBJ says, so juice for the stream. First time here. Excited to hear the knowledge swimming around Mikey's head. Hey, man, I really, really appreciate that. Hopefully you're still here. I know we're 26 minutes in and I'm just getting to your stuff. How big of a bump? Okay. How big of a bump do we expect with Dawson Knox with Kincaid not playing? Yeah, I have him on my heat map. I have him pretty high in the, come on, let's flip over to the, I have a tab on the heat map, streamers and stashes. If you're looking for defenses, I got you. You're looking for kickers, I got you. Tight ends, quarterbacks, running backs that you want to stash on your bench in case an injury happens, I got all that for you. Dawson Knox is pretty high up here. He's pretty high on the list. He's the third name on the list. I'm treating him like a solid tight end too. He's a plug and play streaming option, and this is why. He's going against the Kansas City Chiefs. That game should be a bit of a shootout, should be particularly pass heavy. And the Chiefs are the worst defense in football when it comes to containing tight ends. They're hemorrhaging the most PPR points per game to enemy tight ends, most catches, most yards, 9th most touchdowns. Like, they're just giving up production left and right. 5 tight ends in 9 games have scored 10 or more PPR points against the Chiefs. 4 of them scored 15 or more. Like, Cade Otton scored 21.7 in week 9. Isaiah Likely had 26 way back in week 1. They are just giving up production left and right. And then the other piece, by the way, is that, where is it? Dawson Knox, right here. Dawson Knox averaged 10.3 PPR points per game and 4.6 targets per game over 29 games between 2021 and 2022, which, by the way, were his best years with Josh Allen. The dude was getting you 10.3 PPR points per game over 2 seasons. And now he's getting, that was pre-Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid wasn't even in the league yet. And now we're kind of going back to where we were without Dalton Kincaid playing. I'm not saying he needs to be in lineups if you have him, but if you're looking to plug somebody in off waivers, Dawson Knox is probably as good as it gets for a plug and play waiver wire tight end. Hope that helps. Do you expect Trevor Lawrence to return the season, or should I look to move BTJ while he has a little value? I think so. All the Twitter doctors that I follow, most notably the biggest name I follow is Dr. Deepak Chona. That guy's, if you don't follow Dr. Chona, I highly recommend it. That dude's usually pretty spot on with his injury suggestions. But anyway, he's not expecting Trevor Lawrence to play. There would be a chance if the Jaguars were better and had a chance at the playoffs, but the more they lose, and they're probably going to get whooped this weekend, the more it's likely that they just wash their hands, call the season a lost cause. And he's going to need surgery. They might as well just get it over with. So I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be playing anytime soon. As far as trading BTJ goes, I mean, yeah, there's obviously not a lot of hope there. But it's also likely that your league mates know that. So I'd be careful about selling him too low. Like, your league mates probably know he's not as valuable as he was, but don't just like give him away for free just because you don't want him on your team. Let's see. This one is kind of like what we're just talking about. Big Mike McCarthy finally admitted Rico taking on a lead role. What kind of jump can we expect out of Rico rest of season? Currently, not really any jump. He's actually been the lead back over the last several weeks. It's just nobody's actually said that. If you look at his numbers, if you look at the box score over the last, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. Here, I'll just pop up. Let's see if I can pop it up real quick. I'll talk through it while I'm popping this up. But if you look at the last several weeks, and I'm going to give you guys I'm going to peel back the curtain a little bit and give you guys a little peek into my back end stuff. This isn't something that I give to my subscribers largely because it's super unorganized and it doesn't really make sense. This is something that I'm looking at as I'm creating the weekly heat map. I'm just waiting for it to load here. If you look at the last several weeks, Rico Dowdle has already been the lead back. It's just Mike McCarthy hasn't said, oh, he's our lead back, right? So if it pops up here, it's still stuck on Jake Ferguson and Jalen Tolbert. Here we go. Rico Dowdle has 11 or more touches in each of the last 7 games. He had 22 touches in week 5. He had 17 touches in week 9, 15 touches in week 10. Zeke only had 6 touches in week 10. He has just 2 games over 9 touches all year. Like, Rico's already been operating as the lead back, and now the Cowboys are going to be without Dak Prescott for the rest of the season. I'm not expecting a jump from Rico Dowdle at all. I think we're just going to see a lot more of the same. The Cowboys offense isn't going to be good. They're going to struggle to move the ball. The only hope for Rico Dowdle in my eyes is right here, these green boxes, that he's racking up catches and paying off in the PPR game when the Cowboys fall behind, which is going to be frequently. Like, they're not even expected to score 18 points this week. They're going to have to throw the ball all over the place. So I'm not expecting a jump for Rico. Mr. Gus is in the house. What's up, my friend? Thank you for being here. All right. Jeff Rogers wants to know Cortland Sutton or Calvin Ridley, Steelers defense or Dolphins defense. I'll start with the defense here real quick since we're here. Steelers. Who do the Steelers play? Well, Steelers aren't even on my defensive list. So I'm guessing, the Ravens. No. I would not start the Steelers at all. Like, anybody but the Steelers. The Ravens are, I think, third. I think the Ravens have the 3rd highest implied point total in the NFL this week. I would not want to start the Pittsburgh Steelers. Meanwhile, the Miami Dolphins are going to get up against the Raiders, who are expected to score less than 19 points. I'd feel really good about putting the Dolphins defense in, and that one's not even close. Like, I feel really like some of these decisions is like 51-49. This one's like 99-1. All right, and then we got Cortland Sutton or Calvin Ridley. Now, Cortland Sutton, by the way, has actually been he's quietly putting up wide receiver 1 numbers right now. A lot of people don't realize that. Like, Bo Nix has got that offense going. Bo Nix looks great. Cortland Sutton is balling right now. He's quietly right here, bottom line, quietly putting up wide receiver 1 numbers over the last 3 games. It has a good chance to continue in this optimistic week 11 matchup. We already talked about the Falcons at Broncos. Mediocre game. There's not anything that's particularly exciting nor scary about that game itself. But over the last 3 games, Cortland Sutton scored 18 or 19 points in all 3 of those games, and he's averaging 18.7 PPR points, and perhaps more importantly, 10 targets per game over the last 3 games. If you want to look at the season at a whole, it's colder of a picture, right? 11.7 PPR points, 7.7 targets. But ever since his goose egg, ever since his 0 a couple weeks back, he's on fire over the last 3 weeks. The Falcons are not great against wide receivers. They're giving up the 8th most PPR points per game, including the 6th most catches, 5th most yards. They are holding wide receivers to the 14th fewest yards per game, but that's mediocre, right? 14th fewest is like 19th overall. Like, we're in the middle of the pack there. It's not like they're shutting them down in a big way. 8 wide receivers in the last 9 games have scored 16 or more PPR points against the Falcons, including 4 that scored 20. So we're getting about 1 wide receiver per game that's getting 16 or more PPR points against the Falcons. And if there's 1 wide receiver that's going to do it on the Broncos, that's most likely going to be Cortland Sutton. Like, when it comes to Denver, it's like Cortland Sutton, massive gap, and then everybody else. You can see the list of names here. Lots of wide receivers that hit against Atlanta, and really the only notable names that missed were Jackson Smith, JSN, and Tyler Lockett and CeeDee Lamb. And the 2 Seahawks, JSN and Tyler Lockett, they missed, but DK Metcalf hit. So it's like you can kind of wash those out as well. Point is, we're feeling good about Cortland Sutton. Okay. Then we got, who's the other one? Oh, Calvin Ridley, Tennessee Titans, game number 6. Here we go. Let me scroll down a little bit here. All right, Calvin Ridley, I'm treating him as a boomer bust wide receiver 3. He does have a terrific matchup in week 11. We don't love the game script. Like, typically speaking, like, we don't really want to play very many Tennessee Titans this week. I'd say the list is limited to Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard as far as names that I would even consider for week 11. Uninspiring over under just 40.5 points. That's the lowest of all 40. Like, we're just not expecting a lot of points in this game, not a lot of fantasy. And if there's not going to be a lot of points, there's not going to be a lot of fantasy football fireworks. The Titans have a dangerously low implied total of just 17.5 points. Okay. So the Titans aren't going to score a lot of touchdowns, meaning we're like, if Calvin Ridley is going to hit, it will likely have to be off catches and yards. Although if there is somebody who's going to score in Tennessee, Calvin Ridley's a pretty good bet for that. They are 5.5 point underdogs, meaning they could get pressed into a pass heavy game script if they fall behind the Vikings, which they likely will. Again, that's assuming they care enough to try and keep up. Now, Calvin Ridley, as you can see here, his stock is increasing significantly. He's averaging 17.4 PPR points and 10.3 targets per game in 4 games since his week 6 temper tantrum, right? He threw that temper tantrum in week 6, and ever since then, he's getting more than 10 targets and 17 PPR points per game. That's not bad. Scored 12 or more PPR points in each of the last 3 games, including 24.6 in week 8, 25.4 in week 10. He has 8 or more targets in each of the last 5 games, so he's getting plenty of volume. And he's averaging 12.2 PPR points per game after 5 full games with Will Levis, but just 6.6 targets. So we don't really love that. Now, the matchup is delicious, right? The Vikings are hemorrhaging the 3rd most PPR points per game to opposing wide receivers. That includes the 2nd most catches, 3rd most yards, 7th most touchdowns. 9 wide receivers in 8 games have scored at least 16 PPR points against the Vikings. So again, we have more than 1 wide receiver per game getting 16 or more PPR points against the Minnesota Vikings. And if anybody on the Titans is going to do that, it's Calvin Ridley, right? It's the same thing that we talked about with Courtland Sutton. It goes Calvin Ridley, big drop, everybody else. Although I wish Treylon Burks would come back and get in that lineup, but that's a different conversation. 4 wide receivers in the last 6 games, so getting pretty close to, so about 66% of the time, they're scoring 24 or more PPR points against the Vikings. Pretty big list of names that have hit against the Vikings. Pretty decent sized list of names that have missed against the Vikings. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Both guys are getting a ton of volume. Both guys have above average matchups. The question is who is and isn't or likely more or who is or isn't likely to find the end zone. You think about the Denver Broncos, and they have a pretty strong implied point, pretty solid, at least above average implied point total of 22.5 points, well ahead of the Titans. The Broncos are expected to score more touchdowns than the Titans. If it were me in this situation, there's much more bust ability. I just made that word up because it's awesome. There's much more bust ability to the Titans offense. Like, we've seen Calvin Ridley poop the bed in a big way. I'd feel better about putting Courtland Sutton in my lineup in this particular game. I also think there's some shootout potential with the Falcons Broncos. Like, if Kirk Cousins can be Kirk Cousins in a good way, the good Kirk Cousins, there's some shootout potential there. So if it were me, I'd feel better about putting Courtland Sutton in my lineup. Again, I'd say 95-5 or 99-1 for Dolphins over Steelers. Here I would go Sutton over Ridley, and I'd call it like 55-45. It's a tough call. It's not an easy decision, but I would go with Sutton there. Whew. All right. Got to wet the old whistle here. That is a good beer. Again, if you guys are liking what you're seeing for the heat map, I would very much appreciate if you guys consider scooping it up over on my Patreon channel. It's over on the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football Patreon. You can click on shop and it's all right there. You can get week 11 for just $4.99, or you can get the remainder of the season all the way through the Super Bowl. So if you guys are playing DFS during the playoffs, wild card, division, championship, the only time I don't do a heat map is week 18 and the Pro Bowl. Like that would be the most pointless heat map of all time. $20.93. That comes out to $1.90 per heat map that you can scoop up right here. Okay. I'll drop the link in the comments again to make it easy for y'all, and we'll move on to the next question. Jordan says, I got some tough matchups this week. Hope you're ready. Oh my God. So to think that we're just getting started and we're 40 minutes in, let's roll. All right. Happy Friday to you. I do OBJ. Appreciate it, man. All right. Jordan's first question. Here we go. Same team. Tucker Kraft, Same team. What do you mean? Oh, there's 2 questions. I got it. Tucker Kraft or Kyle Pitts at tight end? Man, I text Jordan all the time, like good or bad with Kyle Pitts. I text him all the time. And then DJ Moore or Drake London at flex. So the good news is we already talked about Drake London. Man, DJ Moore, I would have a tough time starting just in general. Like he's ice cold. We'll get to that one. Let's start with the tight ends. So Tucker Kraft, Green Bay Packers, go Pack go. We got him right here, column yellow, but with a green dot. And if they're in the yellow column, but their dot is green, it means they're closer to, like, they're on the verge of moving up to the next column. And if their dot is orange, they're closer to moving down to the worst column. Tucker Kraft is closer to moving up to column B. Now, game script, we feel pretty good about it for at least on the Packers side. The over-under is not exciting. 41.5 points, second fewest among all games on the week 14 slate. So we're not expecting a lot of points in this game, but that's largely on the Bears side. The Packers side is okay. They have a solid implied total of 23.5 points, which is tied for the 9th most among all 28 teams. So they're not like expected to blow the roof off, but they are expected to be in the upper echelon, the upper half of NFL teams this week when it comes to scoring. They are 5.5 point favorites. That's a nice positive game script. They're going to do their thing. They're going to, Josh Jacobs, assuming the game doesn't somehow get out of hand, Josh Jacobs is a lock for 15 to 20 touches, but they also throw the ball plenty enough for fantasy football purposes. Tucker Kraft has been great this year. 11.8 PPR points per game in 6 full games with Jordan Love. He's getting over 5 targets, 3 catches, 43 yards. He's one of Jordan Love's favorite targets once they get down into as they like to call it, the gold zone, when it's time to score touchdowns. Tucker Kraft's at or near the top of Jordan Love's look list. He scored 12 or more PPR points in 3 of 6 games, including higher outings of 17.3, 24.8. So there's plenty of ceiling there for Tucker Kraft. To be fair, he did also score fewer than 8 PPR points in the other 3 of 6 games. So there's a little bit of a basement as well. So it's a little bit boom bust when it comes to Tucker Kraft. Now, the Bears, when it comes to defending tight ends, they're middle of the pack. Get it? Middle of the pack. Tucker Kraft. Go Pack, go. They're allowing the 14th most PPR points per game to tight ends. That includes the 16th most catches and 11th most yards per game. All of these numbers are right in the middle. They're mediocre. They're not like the Bears aren't this terrific matchup for tight ends, although they're definitely not a scary matchup either. They are holding tight ends to the 10th fewest touchdowns per game, but again, that's still pretty mediocre. 2 tight ends in the last 4 games scored 14 or more PPR points against the Bears, but they're also the only 2 tight ends in 9 games to score 10 or more PPR points against the Bears. Those guys were Evan Ingram and Zach Ertz, while Dalton Schultz, Trey McBride, and Hunter Henry all missed the mark against Chicago, although Dalton Schultz should probably just be removed from this list. The guy hasn't hit 10 PPR points in any game this year, regardless of Stephon Diggs or Nico Collins. So all in all, we feel, I'd call it slightly optimistic about Tucker Kraft in week 11. There's nothing that's screaming like, this dude, you got to play him. And there's nothing that's screaming, you got to sit him. We just feel slightly optimistic. The hope is that he finds the end zone. Then you get to Mr. Kyle Pitts, the maddening Kyle Pitts. Column yellow, but with a yellow dot. Whereas Tucker Kraft was green dot. But I shouldn't even say that, because people start to compare like, oh, this guy's got a green dot, this guy's got a yellow dot, I should play him over him. That's not how that works. Like, sometimes you'll find a guy like Alvin Kamara in column C, and then a guy like Rico Dowdle in column A, but that's not saying you should start Dowdle over Alvin Kamara. That's a big misunderstanding with the heat map that I should find a way to flesh out. But anyway, Kyle Pitts, I'm treating as a quote unquote, I probably don't have any better options type of tight end 1 in week 11. We've talked plenty about lots of Falcons Broncos questions here. I love it. Kyle Pitts is doing well-ish. Like, he hasn't been the Travis Kelce that he was supposed to be, but he's doing well. 10.9 PPR points per game, which is less than Tucker Kraft. After 9 full games with Drake London, that's the split here. A little bit over 5 targets, a little bit over 3 catches, 52 yards. He's not getting the same amount of touchdowns as Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft has more touchdowns in less games with Jordan Love than Kyle Pitts has over the 9-game season with Drake London. He scored 9 or more PPR points in 6 of very nice 9 games, including 25.1 in week 8, but he also scored fewer than 8 PPR points in the other 3 games, including a low of 0. So just like Tucker Kraft, we're talking about a situation where it's like, There's a little bit of a ceiling there, but there's also a basement floor. Like this dude scored 0 points at one point this season. The Broncos are just like the Bears. They're middle of the pack. No wonder this is a tough question, Jordan, because I know you have the heat map. So you probably read these and you're like, oh God, I can't figure this one out. These guys are the same guys. Allowing the 13th most PPR points per game to enemy tight ends, including the 9th most catches, 15th most yards. All of that is pretty mediocre. 15th fewest yards. Just 3 tight ends in 10 games were able to score even just 8 PPR points against the Broncos, though 2 of those 3 scored more than 20. K. Dotton, Brock Bowers, and Travis Kelce all hit. Noah Fant, Pat Freiermuth, Tyler Conklin, and Mark Andrews all missed. So this is a coin flip between these guys. A lot of times my tiebreaker when it comes down to this sort of situation, again, is which of these two guys is more likely to either A, find the end zone or rack up catches. Racking up catches is kind of moot here. Both guys get about the same amount of volume. Neither game is expected to be particularly pass heavy in any way. So you look at touchdowns. The Packers have an implied total of 23 points. The Falcons have an implied total of 21 points. So they're close, but we technically expect the Packers to score more touchdowns. And again, most of the other things are equal. The matchups equal. The targets are equal. I probably would go with Tucker Kraft here and just hope that he finds his way into the end zone once the Packers get down into the gold zone. DJ Moore or Drake London. We already talked about Drake London, so I will hop over to DJ Moore. While I'm finding that, one last thing I'll say is Kyle Pitts is always going to be the talent-based upside guy. Like, it exists. The upside exists. Like, Kyle Pitts could absolutely explode for 30 PPR points at any given time. But it's been 3 years, 4 years, and it's just, at some point you have to play the numbers, and right now the numbers would be Tucker Kraft. All right, DJ Moore. This one's tough, man. I'm treating him as a tough to stomach wide receiver 3 and even better approached as a wide receiver 4/flex. Again, this game isn't a very inspiring game. We're not expecting the Bears to score many points. Their implied total is just 18, so not a lot of touchdown projection there. 5.5 point underdogs. So theoretically, they could be pressed into a pass-heavy game script. That's good news for DJ Moore. But this dude's averaging less than 11 PPR points over 7 games that Keenan Allen has played. He's getting less than 7 targets, less than 4 catches, less than 39 yards. He scored fewer than 12 PPR points in 6 of 7 games with Keenan Allen, fewer than 8 points in each of the last 4 games. Like, this dude hasn't hit 8 PPR points in the last month. I don't know, man. And then you got the Packers. Not necessarily a tough matchup, but they're not a great matchup either. 13th fewest PPR points per game, 9th fewest catches, 12th fewest yards. Now, 9 wide receivers in 9 games have been able to get to 15, including 3 that scored more than 21. But theoretically, that could be Keenan Allen. That could be Roma Dunza. Like, it's not necessarily a sure thing that it'll be DJ Moore if one of them even get there. Just 2 wide receivers in the last 4 games have been able to reach even just 11 PPR points against the Packers, and none of them were even able to get to 19. So I don't know. The matchup itself isn't very good. DJ Moore is ice cold. Obviously, we know DJ Moore is a great wide receiver. At some point, he's going to stop scoring fewer than 8 PPR points per game. That could very well be this week. But I'd feel so much better about putting Drake London in my lineup, even despite the tough matchup. We know the volume's there. Like, Kirk Cousins throws him the ball. It's going to be there. I would go Drake London there. And I feel, whereas Tucker Kraft and Kyle Pitts is like a 51-49 type of split, I would give it like a 65-35. Does that math? Yeah, that adds up. 65-35 split between Drake London over DJ Moore. Hopefully that helps. Crazy Taco is in the house. Happy Friday, broski. Just lost Kincaid. I'm sorry. I would argue that we lost Kincaid in week 1. Dude, it hasn't happened, but he's been okay. Full PPR, I can play Dawson Knox, or I can roll out Dalton Schultz. Friggin' Dalton Schultz, man. He's been one of the most frustrating plays in fantasy football this year, because it's like all of his splits last year, the Houston Texans had Nico Collins all year, Tank Dell for half the year, and then Dalton Schultz was that third option and second option when Tank Dell went down. And he balled out. He played really well. So This year, they lost Nico Collins for a while, and then they lost Stephon Diggs for the year, and just it has not happened for Dalton Schultz. We talked a little bit about Dawson Knox. Let's get into Dalton Schultz because there is something interesting here that I remember writing in the heat map. So going down here, I got him in the feel gross column. There's no way to feel good about starting Dalton Schultz this year. He's a touchdown regression-based streaming option in week 11. On the heat map, I have a touchdown regression cheat sheet, let's call it, that mathematically is meant to help kind of project who is and is not likely to score touchdowns. Like, it's going to show players and the touches that they have, the yards that they have, the touchdowns that they have, and where they should be compared to league averages at that position over the last several years. Dalton Schultz is number 4 on the entire list. He has 310 yards. I forget how many catches, but he has 310 yards and no touchdowns. He's about 2.5 touchdowns behind where he should be historically in terms of being compared to other tight ends. So we have him as a touchdown regression-based streaming option in week 11. Now, we feel pretty good about the Texans in general. They have a solid implied point total, 25 points. That's the 6th most among all 28 teams. This is a team that you want to get exposure to or expecting touchdowns out of the Houston Texans. This is a team you want exposure to in your week 11 fantasy football lineups. Now, again, Dalton Schultz himself has been maddening. 6 PPR points per game after 10 games. He has yet to reach 10 PPR points per game in a single game this season. Even in 5 games without Nico Collins and or Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz wasn't able to score 10 PPR points, but he is averaging a very nice 6.9 PPR points per game. Not actually very nice, just Borat very nice. And 5.2 targets per game. Now, Nico Collins is back. That's a massive dent in anybody's target share. Like, Nico Collins is going to get the ball more than anybody in that offense. But it is fair to wonder, with 29 catches and 310 yards, but no touchdowns, Dalton Schultz is high on the list of positive touchdown regression candidates. Can he get it done against his former team, a Dallas Cowboys defense that's allowing the 3rd most tight end touchdowns per game? Okay, so it's intriguing. It's interesting, right? A lot of times you see NFL teams that want to get their players touchdowns against their former team. Like, we literally just saw Hassan Haskins of the Chargers do it against the Titans last week. This dude never plays. It's always J.K. Dobbins, and last week Gus Edwards was involved. But the Chargers got Hassan Haskins a goal line carry against his former team, the Tennessee Titans. It's petty as heck, but you do see NFL teams do it. So it's interesting to think he's going up against his old team, the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are giving up the 3rd most touchdowns per game. Dalton Schultz is due to score a touchdown at any minute. And the Texans are supposed to score 20. They have an implied total of 25 points. It's interesting, right? It's super speculative. It's a dice roll. It's a gamble. It's like connecting a lot of dots that might not be there. But it's interesting. It's interesting, if nothing else, still. Dawson Knox, we already talked about him. Best possible matchup. Has a good chance to get a decent amount of targets. There'll be no Keon Coleman. Who knows how acclimated to the offense Amari Cooper is. Could be a shootout with the Chiefs. I would go with Dawson Knox there. I mean, we've seen what we're getting out of Dalton Schultz, and it just hasn't been pretty. But for me, I would just roll the dice on Dawson Knox. I really like him as a streamer this week. Aaron Oh, so Aaron was chiming in on the earlier question about London, Tillman, and DK. He has London over Tillman and DK. So take that for what it's worth. Bryce says, "Good afternoon, sir. Start Javonte or Estime." I don't know how RB1 in Denver. I don't love any of them this week, but it's got to be Estime. Like if you're just choosing between those two, it cannot be Javonte Williams. I have him in column F, which you can read what that means in terms of whether or not I'm considering him for my lineup. He handled just 3 touches for 7 yards in week 10, while rookie Audric Estime operated as the team's new RB1. He had, I think, 15 touches in week 10. And it sounded, Sean Payton said he was encouraged with Estime's performance. He's going to get more work. Javonte Williams is not a fantasy football option any longer unless something changes, or until something changes, I should say. But After 3 touches last week, there's no way you can put Javonte Williams in your lineup. Just can't do it. Aleko says, what's up? What's up? Do people still do that? No, not a chance. Aaron says, Jameis revenge game. Yeah, we talked about that. Oh, yeah, because this was the comment that I popped up here. All right, Connor LaRose wants to know, pick one, flex points per reception. Rico, estimate, Taysom, Ricky. I don't want to pick one out of those. All right, let me think here. Rico Dowdle. The saving grace for Rico this week is right here. He'll likely need to rack up catches to stay afloat. Here's the problem with Rico this week. The Cowboys are 7.5-point road underdogs. That's a wide spread that suggests a negative game script, a pass-heavy approach if the Cowboys fall behind, which they likely will. Texans should be able to smash in this game. We saw how bad the Cowboys offense was last week without Dak Prescott. Cooper Rush was not the answer. Trey Lance ended up coming in at some point. The Cowboys are going to fall behind. More likely than not, the Cowboys are going to fall behind and could fall behind big. Even if they don't, let's say they somehow keep it competitive. The Texans are impossible on running backs. They're holding them to the 5th fewest PPR points per game, including the 8th fewest touches, 7th fewest yards, 10th fewest touchdowns overall for running backs. They're tough on the ground. They're holding running backs to the 10th fewest rushing yards and 11th fewest rushing touchdowns. And they're mostly tough through the air, holding running backs to the 3rd fewest catches and 6th fewest receiving yards, while somehow allowing the 12th most receiving touchdowns. Just 4 running backs in 10 games have been able to reach even just 13 PPR points against the Texans. Hasn't been good, right? They've played 10 games and only 8 running backs have been able to get just 10 PPR points against the Texans. They're great against running backs. Cowboys are going to fall behind. The only hope here is that Rico Dowdle racks up catches. And we have seen him be plenty involved in the passing game. He has several games. It should still be popped up here. Yeah, here. He has 2 games of 5 targets, 2 games of 6 targets. Like, we've seen him get catches. There is an opportunity for him to get catches, but man, you're betting on Dallas falling so far behind that he just racks up checkdowns. That's a tough bet to make because that is far from a guarantee. But then you got Audric Estime. Obviously, he is now all of a sudden on the fantasy football radar. But man, there's no way to feel good about starting him this week. I'm approaching him as a touchdown or bust RB3/flex in week 11. He took over as the team's leading ball carrier in week 10. He handled 14 touches, all of which were carries. So he's 53 scoreless yards. So he had 5.3 PPR points. Now this is the problem with Estime. 0. He's a 0 in the passing game. He didn't catch passes in college either. They're not going to use him there. They already have Javonte Williams. They have Jaleel McLaughlin. He's going to be a between the tackles type of banger, big bodied running back. Those could be fun to watch in real football, but they oftentimes don't pay off in fantasy football because you need them to find the end zone to pay off. They're not going to rack up catches. They're not likely to get big plays because they're not doing a lot of outside runs. So there's not going to be a lot of yards. Like, you need him to fall into the end zone for it to pay off. Now, the Atlanta Falcons, they're holding running backs to the 10th fewest PPR points per game, which includes the 13th fewest scrimmage yards and 4th fewest touchdowns from scrimmage. And here's the problem for Estime, right? It'd be different if we were talking about, let's just say Alvin Kamara, because that's the first name that came to mind. Obviously, it's not even close. The Falcons give up plenty of production to running back through the air. They're allowing the 3rd most catches, 14th most receiving yards, and 6th most receiving touchdowns. But that's not going to be Estime. Estime needs to butter his bread on the ground, and that's where Atlanta's tough. They're holding running backs to the 13th fewest rushing yards and 2nd fewest rushing touchdowns. They've played 10 games. I got to change. I don't know why this dot is green. I have to change that. I'm going to change that right now, actually. Bear with me, my friends. So the Falcons have played 10 games and only 8 running backs have been able to reach even just 10 PPR points against them. So I don't know. I don't feel good about Rico Dowdle. I don't feel good about Estime. Taysom Hill is the ultimate Taysom, not Taysom. Sorry, I've been educated on my Wisconsin accent there. Taysom Hill, I mean, that's the ultimate coin flip there. Taysom Hill is the ultimate boomer bust tight end in fantasy football. He'll get you 0 some weeks. He'll get you 20 other weeks. Matchups just don't matter for this guy because he's basically created his own position. Like, it doesn't make sense to study running, like how defenses perform against running backs or tight ends or anything like that. Now, he does have some added upside with Chris Olave on IR, Rashid Shaheed's on IR, Bub Means, Kendre Miller. All of those guys are on IR. Cedric Wilson might not play. Like, they just don't have options for the football. And we've seen him get the rock recently. He's averaging 6.2 touches per game, 2.3 targets, 1.7 catches, 38.3 scrimmage yards, 0.5 touchdowns, 0.5 passing yards. Ultimately, he's bringing you about 8.5 PPR points per game, and he's as boom or bust as it gets. He scored 14.4 PPR points in week 4, 16 points in week 9, but he otherwise scored fewer than 8 points in each of the other 4 games. So it's about as boom, like it's a total dice roll, total coin flip. We have no idea when Taysom's going to hit and when he isn't. What we do know is that the game itself, Browns Saints, it's not expected to be particularly high scoring. It's not expected to be particularly low scoring. The Saints have a decent enough implied total, 23 points, that they could find the end zone against the New Orleans Saints. And Taysom Hill is a good bet to be among the red zone options once they get into the red zone. So there's a little bit of touchdown upside there. And then last but not least, you got Mr. Ricky Pearsall. And I have no idea if I say that name correctly, but there it is. Ricky Pearsall, no idea. I'm approaching him as a boom or bust wide receiver 4/flex with a decent chance of booming in this bleeding matchup, which we'll get to in a second. Again, we talked about this a little bit. We like the 49ers Seahawks game. We like the game in general. We like the 49ers. They're projected to score 27.5 points. That's the second most among all 28 teams on the Week 10 slate. They're expected to score touchdowns. They're one of the top teams that you want exposure to in your fantasy football lineups. They are 6.5-point favorites, so they're going to run the ball as much as they possibly can. But Brock Purdy still throws the ball plenty enough to make a dent, pay up some fantasy football dividends. And again, if the Seahawks can keep it competitive, they're going to have to keep the ball in the air at some point. Now, despite Juwan Jennings returning in week 10, and he played a big role. He played 91% of the 49ers offensive snaps. That was more than any other wide receiver on the 49ers, even Deebo Samuel. But despite that, Ricky Pearsall's playing time did not diminish in week 10. He played 64% of the snaps, which is about where he's been so far this season. So his playing, like, Juwan Jennings came back, but that didn't send Ricky Pearsall down the totem pole of offensive snaps. He turned in a season/career best 17.3 PPR points on 6 targets, 4 catches, 73 yards, 1 touchdown. Dude got 6 targets. That's a great number. Obviously, it's like, can't guarantee he's going to get another 6 here, but it's a good sign, right? Coming into the game, we didn't know. We didn't know if Juwan Jennings coming back would suddenly create this big wrench in the target. All these emails. In the target totem pole, and it didn't. Not for Ricky Pearsall. He's averaging 11.4 PPR points per game, 5 targets per game over just 3 in his career, right? Really, really small sample size, but he's off to a good start. And then you got the matchup, and the Seahawks are absolutely bleeding when it comes to defending wide receivers. They're allowing the 12th most PPR points per game to enemy wide receivers. That includes the 9th most catches, 13th most yards, and the 7th most touchdowns in the NFL. Check this out. 10 wide receivers in the last 6 games. Okay, so we're getting close to 2 wide receivers per game. Have been able to score 16 or more PPR points against the Seahawks, including 4 that scored 20 or more PPR points. They're getting smashed by wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Deebo Samuel, Drake London, Ken Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Cooper Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, all smashed against Seattle. Cortland Sutton, Brandon Ayuk, Darnell Mooney, and Amari Cooper with the Bills pooped the bed against Seattle. Like, they are bleeding. There's not a lot of upside to Rico Dowdle. Like, we're hoping he catches passes. There's not a lot of upside to Audric Estime. We're hoping he falls into the end zone. We have no idea what to expect from Taysom Hill. We're hoping he falls into the end zone. Ricky Pearsall, there's upside here. There's a little bit of shootout potential. He's getting volume. The 49ers are expected to score nearly 28 points. The Seahawks are terrible against wide receivers right now. Since all four of these are dice rolls, not a single one of these is a safe play, Connor. So if it's me, if I know that none of them are safe, I'm rolling the dice on upside. I'm taking a shot. I'm swinging for the fences. I'm going for the upside. That's Ricky. That's Ricky Pearsall for me. And this is a good example of Ricky Pearsall is in column D of my heat map, and Estime is in column C. That doesn't mean I would play Estime over Ricky Pearsall. I'd be going Ricky here. Hope that helps. All right. Let me grab a drink. And again, let me just kind of scroll through here so that you guys are like, oh, maybe I should go get the heat map. Maybe I should buy the heat map. Oh. If you guys are loving the heat map, and I prompt, one quick thing I want to clear up here, and this popped up on LinkedIn earlier this week. It doesn't matter if you're let's say this is your very first week playing fantasy football, or if you've been playing for 50 years and you're in 70 leagues. It does not matter. Like, this isn't for beginners. This isn't for degenerates. This is for people who play fantasy football. If you play fantasy football and you have lineup decisions to make every week, whether that's in your league, DFS, a lot of people use this for prop betting. No matter what it is, if you play fantasy football, this is a massive library of information. You guys love doing your own research. Great. The heat map has it all for, like, go to the heat map and do your research. There's a lot of people that say, oh, I just love doing my own research. Great. Use the heat map. It's an encyclopedia of information. Okay. $4.99. That's Twitter. $4.99 for week 11. Or you can get all of them for $1.90 all the way through the Super Bowl. And since I'm here, let's drop it into the comments. All right. Next question. Let's keep this show rolling. Alekos wants to know, BRJ, Brian Robinson Jr. Oh, I thought this was a start sit. It's a trade question. Brian Robinson Jr. and DK Metcalf for James Conner. Tried to get Mixon, didn't work out. Team is Josh Allen, Brian Robinson, Kenneth Walker, Estime, Chase Brown, RB1 moving forward. By the way, Chase Brown, like league-winning RB1 moving forward if he keeps that kind of usage. Amari Cooper, Zay Flowers, DK, Pittman, Neighbors, Tyreek Kittle. All right, so at running back, we're looking a little thin, right? Chase Brown's going to be your RB1. Kenneth Walker or Chase Brown will be our RB1. The other guy will be our RB2. And then after that, it gets a little bit thin. So, yeah, you could definitely use some help at running back. Wide receiver's strong, man. DK Metcalf, you got Malik Neighbors. Dude gets targets. Tyreek come on. Let's go now. My concern with Tyreek, by the way, is that if the Dolphins lose another game and they start to look like they're out of the playoffs, he needs wrist surgery, and he could just shut it down at any point. So there's a concern there. But you're much stronger at wide receiver than at running back. I agree. Although I think Brian Robinson plus DK Metcalf for James Conner is too much. That's too expensive for James Conner. James Conner is only getting you like 14 PPR points per week right now. Something like that. In fact, I'll just pop it up in my peel back the curtain sheet. James Conner, 14.8 PPR points per game down here. He's been struggling over since week 5. He's getting 15 PPR points per game since week 5. I mean, it's fine, but Brian Robinson is going to get you plenty of work. I think it's too much. I would, if you're trading Brian Robinson plus DK Metcalf, I would aim a little bit higher at running back. And I don't have a specific name that comes to mind, but to me, that is too much. I think it's okay, but I think DK for Conner is probably still DK. Like, I'd probably still take DK Metcalf over James Conner if I just had those two. So adding Brian Robinson, it's too much, in my opinion. I don't know what other options you have. I don't know anything else about your league, but just in a vacuum, it's too much. Aaron, I have to start Cooper Rush and Mac Jones this week. I knew I should have threw Ertz in. Oh, yeah, man, you're hurting. You're hurting. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to hear that. That one hurts. Andrew wants to know 10-team PPR league. Would you play Kareem Hunt or David Montgomery? I would go David Montgomery, man. Against the Jaguars. Woo, baby. Like, I mean, Kareem Hunt's balling. Dude's getting like 23 touches per game right now. But man, yeah, David. Well, whatever. Let's hop over the heat map. That's what we're here for, right? So let's start with David Montgomery. I have him blue dot. I almost threw him into column A, but there's so many players on the Lions that I loved that I didn't want to throw them all into column A. But man, David Montgomery and or Jahmyr Gibbs should absolutely go insane this week. I'm treating David Montgomery as a high-end RB2 with exciting game script plus matchup-based upside in week 11. He was playing like an RB1, but he's in a bit of a cold. I should put the ice cube thing right here. He's in a little bit of a cold stretch. The Lions have a mouthwatering implied point total of 30.5 points. That's insane. That's a lot of points. That's easily the most among all 28 teams. They're expected to score touchdowns. Like, if there's one team you want to get exposure to this week, it's the Lions for sure. It's the Lions for sure. They are bullies. They are take your lunch money and stuff you in a locker bullies. 13.5 point home favorites this week, suggesting a blowout win, supremely positive game script. Expect a run-heavy approach from the Lions as they work to kill the clock in the second half. Honestly, my only concern is that they get so far ahead that they just run Craig Reynolds and like that they just don't even need to give their guys the ball. Montgomery scored 15 to 21 PPR points in each of the first 5 games this year, but he's been a little bit cold. 10 to 13 points in each of the last 4. This is a great get-right spot. This is a great spot for him to get back on track. The Jaguars are absolutely terrible against Jaguars. They're hemorrhaging the third most against running backs. They're hemorrhaging the third most PPR points per game, third most touches, 10th most scrimmage yards, 6th most touchdowns. They are somewhat decent on the ground. They're mediocre when it comes to rushing running backs. They're holding them to the 16th fewest rushing yards, simultaneously allowing the 12th most rushing touchdowns. They're vulnerable through the air, 4th most catches, 4th most receiving yards, 3rd most receiving touchdowns. So theoretically, it sets up a little bit better for Jahmyr Gibbs than David Montgomery, but not enough in a way that it would deter me from David Montgomery. Like, both of these guys should absolutely feast. 8 running backs in 10 games have scored at least 15 PPR points. 3 running backs in the last 5 have scored 21 or more. 2 running backs in the last 3 have scored 25 or more. And we're talking about a team, by the way. We're talking about a defense. The Jaguars, the season is collapsing. Like, Trevor Lawrence isn't going to play. Their coach might be on the outs. A lot of times you start to see these NFL teams and defenses that, like, there's not much to play for, and they start making business decisions. Like, they just don't care. Like, this is all like theory based, so take this with a grain of salt, but it's like, and that's one thing I want to point out about the heat map, by the way. Everything that's in the heat map is data specific. It's data focused. It's stats. It's facts. It's data. I don't put my opinion. I don't put my gut. I don't put my theories into these things. It's all data. But it is worth noting, like, just theoretically, you see NFL teams, you see NFL defenses that kind of start to, the season's over. Why should I put my body on the line diving for a running back that's going to run me over, sort of thing. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. I'm going to stop talking there because I want to keep it fact focused here. But I mean, dude, the Jaguars are bad against running backs. The Lions are going to score 1 million touchdowns. David Montgomery is always a good bet to be like, there's very few running backs I would play over David Montgomery this week. But let's get into Kareem Hunt. I do feel good about Kareem Hunt. I have him as a solid RB2 play in week 11. Game could be a shootout. Chiefs at Bills, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. That could be a great game. I don't know how this game is not in prime time. Like, I think any NFL fan would love to watch Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. It sucks that we have to choose the window that we want to watch. Decent implied total for the Chiefs, 22 points, nowhere near they're a whole touchdown behind the Lions in terms of projected points. 2.5 point underdogs. That's not enough to be significant. Now, Kareem Hunt is balling 16.8 PPR points per game over 6 games as the Chiefs RB1 on a per touch basis. Kareem Hunt hasn't been that great. Like, the efficiency is not terrific, but doesn't matter when you're getting 23.2 touches per game. The Chiefs have no reason to dial back on that either. They're about to get Isaiah Pacheco back. Why not keep riding Kareem Hunt? 21 or more touches in each of the last 5 games, 17 or more PPR points in 4 of the last 5 games, 10 targets in week 10. Now that's a number that could come in handy when you see something that we're about to discuss. Now the Bills are awful, just like the Jaguars, when it comes to containing enemy running backs. They are hemorrhaging the second most PPR points per game, 10th most touches, second most scrimmage yards, 10th most touchdowns. Just like the Jaguars, they're mediocre on the ground. They're allowing the 14th most rushing yards, but they're somehow holding running backs to the 11th fewest rushing touchdowns. But they are absolutely getting hammered by receiving running backs. They're giving up the most catches, most receiving yards, and second most receiving touchdowns. And when you take Kareem Hunt getting 10 targets last week, there's a little bit of drool that can start happening there. But it's also worth noting, I mean, he is averaging just 3 targets per game, including what we saw from him last week. Like that sudden explosion in the passing game was very sudden and came out of nowhere. He previously had not exceeded 3 targets in any of the other 5 games. He had 1 target in 3 of 6 games that he's played with the Chiefs. So that 10 target game, that came out of nowhere. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on him being a big factor in the passing game. Ultimately, like I'd feel good about having Kareem Hunt in my lineup, but David Montgomery is going to score 14 touchdowns this week. It's obviously not, but man, I'd go with David Montgomery for sure. Alekos wants to know, I got offered Aaron Jones and Mark Andrews for Kittle. What do we think? I think it's fine. I don't know. And yeah, I would be totally fine with that, especially if you need a running back. Like Aaron Jones is a high quality RB2. Obviously he's dealing with a rib injury, but high quality RB2 in an above average offense. He's getting you plenty of, he's got the workload. Like he's getting plenty of volume. He's a great addition to your team. I don't even know if I should call him a high quality RB2. He might be like a back end RB1. And then you're getting Mark Andrews, who had 6 targets last week. Obviously there was no Isaiah Likely, but he's a touchdown or bust. Don't get me wrong. George Kittle is elite. Like we're back to seeing prime George Kittle. Like he's a top 2, top 3. Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, top 2/3 tight end. So if you can stomach losing that, and again, I don't know anything about your league. I don't know what the waiver wire looks like. Typically, if I don't get Travis Kelce or George Kittle or Brock Bowers, I'm streaming tight end, which is something you can't really do at running back. You can't just like, oh shoot, I need a running back. Let me go grab Aaron Jones off the. Aaron Jones is a bad example. You need injuries for running backs to pay off. Point is the value, if you had to like put this trade on a scale, it's at worst even, and it might tip even more towards the Aaron Jones side. Totally fine with that trade. All right. Jay wants to know, pick 3, please. Tyreek, DK, Hopkins, Tillman, Brian Thomas Jr., full PPR. Okay. I'll tell you right off the top that Brian Thomas Jr. is not an option to me when I'm looking at these other names. I don't want like catching passes from Mac Jones. I mean, he does have a great matchup against Detroit, but I mean, dude, the Jaguars are expected to score. Is there a ghost in here? Did y'all see that? Creepy. Jaguars, less than 17 implied points, so we're not expecting a lot of touchdowns there. Brian Thomas is not an option for me when looking at this. We talked about DK. We talked about Tillman, and I said Tillman over DK. So right now, DK is the odd man out. Tyreek, I'm still at a spot where you just can't. Tyreek can't be benched. I mean, it's a tough matchup. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, but we know it's coming. Like we have plenty of data on Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill. We know it's coming. I can't bench Tyreek. Like he's just not a benchable option to me. So he's locked in. And Tillman, by default, is locked in because I have him over DK. So now it's just between Hopkins and DK for me. Hopkins, we've talked about the game. Could be a shootout. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. He's averaging. We're only talking about 2 games here, but 19.1 PPR points per game. In week 9, he went nuts. He caught 8 of 9 targets for 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, 28.6 PPR points per game. In week 10, he came crashing back down to earth,
caught 4 of 5 targets for 56 scoreless yards, aka 9.6 PPR points. Now he's going up against Buffalo, who's pretty tough on wide receivers so far this year. They're holding them to the 10th fewest PPR points per game. That includes 10th fewest yards, 9th fewest touchdowns. Now they are allowing the 16th most catches. So that's cool, I guess. All in all, these numbers are pretty mediocre, slightly on the pessimistic side of mediocre. Just 11 wide receivers in 10 games have been able to reach even just 10 PPR points, right? Usually you want to see like 10 is even a lot of PPR points. It's 6 catches for 40 yards or, 3 catches for 70 yards, whatever. Just 5 wide receivers in 10 games have been able to score 15 or more. So we're talking half a wide receiver per game that's able to get to 15 against Buffalo. Christian Kirk, Nico Collins, Alan Lazard, Garrett Wilson, Alec Pierce, all of those guys hit against the Bills, but Marvin Harrison, Brian Thomas, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, JSN, Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Josh Downs, all of those guys missed against Buffalo. So if I have to leave out, Tyreek is in, BTJ is out. Tillman is in. Wow. This one's tough. We know that DK is going to get the volume. It's not a given with DeAndre Hopkins. Chiefs and Seahawks have a similar implied point total. Touchdown opportunity is about a break even. DK struggles against the 49ers, but I don't like to put a lot of stock into that. I think the tiebreaker here is the possibility of volume, and that one would favor DK Metcalf. So to me, it's Tyreek, DK, and Tillman. The odd men out here are BTJ and Hopkins. Now, I do want to make clear, Tyreek is locked in. DK versus Hopkins to me is like 51 to 49%. Like to be candid, it's 50-50. It really is. But if I have to pick one, I'm going for the targets, and that would be DK Metcalf. I'm going for the volume, right? The hope there is that like Seahawks fall behind, they got to throw the ball, DK Metcalf benefits. But I don't know, man. That's nothing about that decision is easy, right? Some of these I'm like, oh yeah, I'd go this way, not even close. This one, I'm sorry to say, man. I'm sorry to say, Jay, this is about as coin flip as it possibly gets. I would say it's like not even 51 to 49. It's like 50.1 to 49.9. So just to clarify, Tyreek, DK, and Tillman are in. BTJ and Hopkins are out. Okay. Hope that helps. Shockley was thinking Tillman. Thanks, bro. No, sir. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in here. All right. I do. OBJ says, I'm still here, baby. Keep on spilling the knowledge. I appreciate that, man. I love you guys, man. You guys always get me pumped up and excited. Sometimes this entrepreneur thing can be a drag. It can be really hard. It can knock you down. Like, honest to God, so I put on Thursday night when I published the heat map, it's like 5:30 at night, and I published heat map's ready, and I send out an email, and then I go to check my notifications on Patreon, and it was like, so-and-so canceled their membership. And I'm like, cool. Always awesome to like do 30 plus hours of research, 20 plus hours of writing, and then it's like canceled, and it's like, sweet, awesome. That's cool. So anyway, my whole point is your words, your encouragement, your enthusiasm. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for pumping me up here. All right, we got Judah. Judah wants to know, got to start sick question. Bring it on. Here we go. DeAndre Swift or Ramondre Stevenson? I'm trying to think who the Patriots even play. Can't quite remember off the top of my head. All right, let's start with DeAndre Swift against, he's on the Bears, so Pat, just kidding. That was the worst burn ever. All right, DeAndre Swift, he's in the yellow column. Perfectly fine RB2 in week 11. There's nothing that's especially encouraging or discouraging about his matchup. Although we don't love that he's a 5.5 point underdog against the Packers. Personally, I love that he's a 5.5 point underdog, but from a fantasy standpoint, we don't love that he's a 5.5 point underdog. Uninspiring over under 41.5 points. Bears have a dangerously low implied total of just 18 points. That's the fourth fewest, although it's probably not fewer than the Patriots. 5.5 point underdogs. Again, that starts to get close to a wide enough spread where you start to expect a little bit more of a pass heavy approach than a run heavy approach. It's not a death sentence, but it's a red flag for DeAndre Swift for sure. He's averaging 14.4 PPR points after 9 up and down games with the Bears, handling 18 plus touches per game, which is great. 3.3 targets per game, 88.2 scrimmage yards. I said it's been up and down. It's been boom or bust. He scored 14 or more PPR points in 5 of 9 games this year, so over 50%. And that includes 3 games over 20. But he also has fewer than 9 PPR points in 4 of 9 games, including a low of 3. So he scored 14 or more PPR points in 5 of the last 6, though. He's been pretty hot, but he did score just 7 points last week. So he got on this really hot 5-game stretch and then completely pooped the bed in week 10. When it comes to the Packers against running backs, they are middle of the pack. I love that one. That's so good. They're holding running backs to the 16th fewest. It's really not fewest if it's 16 out of 32, but 16th fewest PPR points per game, including 11th fewest touches, 16th fewest scrimmage yards, and 12th fewest touchdowns from scrimmage. So they're mediocre. They're like on the sliver of pessimistic side of mediocre against running backs. They're mediocre on the ground. They are allowing the 16th most rushing yards, but they're holding running backs to the 14th fewest rushing touchdowns. Mediocre, middle of the pack. They're slightly vulnerable through the air. 15th most catches, 10th most receiving yards, 15th most receiving touchdowns. Now, 10 running backs in 9 games have at least been able to score 10 points against them. So more than one running back per game is scoring at least 10 points against Green Bay. But just 5 running backs in 9 games have been able to score 15 or more PPR points against Green Bay. So again, very mediocre. Saquon Barkley did the dang thing against Green Bay. Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, Kyron Williams, Joe Mixon, all those guys smashed against Green Bay, but James Conner missed. Tank Bigsby missed. David Montgomery missed. It's about as Green Bay is about as coin flip as it gets. It's mediocre. It's not exciting. There's nothing that's particularly good about the matchup. And then you take the Bears' implied point total. You take their spread, which is not good. There's more red flags to DeAndre Swift than there is green flags in week 11. But the only other option here is Ramondre Stevenson. And it's going to be the same thing, right? Same column, yellow column. Let me pop up here. Same thing. We don't feel good about the over-under, 43.5. We don't feel good about the Patriots in general. They have a week implied total of 19.5. So it's actually more than Chicago. 6th fewest among all 28 teams. They're also underdogs, slightly wide spread, 4.5 point underdogs, but it is a better spread than what we're seeing with Chicago. So there's that. Ramondre is getting 14.2 PPR points per game. He's just like DeAndre Swift. He's very boomer bust. He scored 17 or more PPR points in 5 of 9 games, fewer than 11 points in 4 of 9 games. Like, I'm getting total images of the Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other. That's DeAndre Swift and Ramondre Stevenson right now in this very scenario, both as a player and in their matchups and in their game scripts, all of it. He has handled 15 or more touches in 7 of 9 games, including 4 games of 20 or 21 or more touches. The Rams, just like the Packers, they're mediocre against running backs. 13th fewest PPR points per game. They're mediocre on the ground. 13th most rushing yards, but 14th fewest rushing touchdowns. Very mediocre. Mostly pessimistic through the air. They're allowing the 12th most receiving yards, but they're otherwise holding running backs to the 16th fewest catches, but no receiving touchdowns. That could change any minute. 6 running backs in 9 games have been able to score 15 or more PPR points against the Rams, one of which was able to get past 20. 10 running backs in 10 games have scored at least 10. I mean, this thing is as coin flip as it gets. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, all of those guys hit, whereas I can't see because it says I have a window blocking. Oh, Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, Kenneth Walker, and Devon Achane, all those guys missed. I mean, this is as even as it can possibly be. The question to ask yourself here, Judah, is which team, not even player, which team between the Bears and the Patriots is more likely to compete? Like Patriots, can they compete against the Rams? Bears, can they compete against the Packers? And which team is more likely to score touchdowns? Which of these running backs is more likely to fall into the end zone? Both game script and implied point totals point towards Ramondre Stevenson. So if I had to choose one or the other, I wouldn't feel overly confident in either decision. But the tiebreakers to me are the implied totals, which would be advantage Ramondre Stevenson, and the spread, which would be advantage Ramondre Stevenson, because everything else is just about equal. If it's me, I'm going with Ramondre Stevenson and just hoping I make the right call here. Hope it helps. GQ's in the house. Hi, all. Good luck to everybody in week 11. I just want to take another quick second to remind everybody, any newcomers, if you have a chance, I am doing my best to get in touch, get the attention of the guys over at the Dan Patrick Show. They're looking for a host when they're in Wisconsin for the NFL draft in 2025 in Green Bay, and I want to be the guy that hosts them. So I'm doing everything I can. If you have a minute, pop over to my Twitter. I will share the link with you. I don't know what it'll take. I don't know if we need comments or likes or retweets. I don't know what we need, but if you can, I'd appreciate it, and give me a follow while you're over there. Trying to get the Dan Patrick Show to show some love here. So, all right. Also, the heat map, guys, if you're loving it, you can get it on my Patreon, $4.99 for week 11, or you can get the rest of the season all the way through the Super Bowl for $20.93 over on the Patreon. I'm dropping the old link right in the comments once again here. All right, here we go. This is interesting. Doug Peterson says that he's optimistic Trevor Lawrence will return after the bye. He also said there's no talks of surgery. So that's different than so that is coming from the coach, which is noteworthy. What I was talking about earlier, I got from Dr. Deepak Chona, who is a medical doctor that plays fantasy football, and he has a whole injury database that he tweets about all the time. He's a terrific follow. But that is awesome to know. Jay, I really appreciate you sharing that. By the way, one thing I didn't mention yet during this episode is that because this heat map takes me 30 plus hours per week to create, once I'm done on Thursday night, I pretty much unplug from the NFL until this show. Like, I don't pay attention to the headlines. I don't pay it because I need to just recharge the batteries. So I totally did not even see. I haven't heard anything about what Jay is saying here. So I really appreciate you throwing that in there. I appreciate you. I do OBJ. The only thing I don't like is that these are all screen names. I don't know who's who. So I'd love to know who this is, but I appreciate you, man. Thanks for, or gal. Thank you for popping in. I really appreciate it. Zane wants to know, hey, Mikey, Zane, LinkedIn. Should I trade Cooper Kupp and Breece Hall for JMO? Oh, wait, sorry. Should I trade Cooper Kupp and Breece Hall? First of all, I don't want to trade either of those guys. What else we got? And Jamison Williams, you're going to get, in return, you're going to get Malik Neighbors, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy, and Ladd McConkey. I would not do this trade. Couple reasons. A, I don't want to trade Cooper Kupp or Breece Hall. Breece Hall to me is a massive buy low candidate in fantasy football right now. Somebody actually reached out to me in the DMs on LinkedIn saying he wanted to trade Breece Hall for, I forget, but it was like Bucky Irving plus something else. And I'm like, oh my God, there's people willing to sell Breece Hall. And his schedule coming up, by the way, do not trade Breece Hall if you don't have to. Hang on to Breece Hall. I don't want to trade Cooper Kupp either. Jamison Williams doesn't really move the needle as far as this trade goes. I like Jamison Williams. I think he's a perfectly fine fantasy football assets, but as far as this trade goes, he's just kind of a throw-in. Malik Neighbors, I love. Daniel Jones is force-feeding that guy. But to me, that's a little bit like we're talking about a pretty close to break even with Breece Hall. And then you got Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco is coming back, and that's exciting. But I was talking a little bit ago about Dr. Deepak Chona, one of my favorite medical follows on Twitter. And he connected the dots, made a really good point that Mark Andrews came back for a very similar injury last year. And was a significantly reduced. We saw significantly reduced production from Mark Andrews when he returned from a similar injury to Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, Mark Andrews, theoretically, Mark Andrews hasn't been the same since that injury. It's not the same injury, but it's a similar injury. So anyway, the point is we could see reduced efficiency, reduced productivity from Isaiah Pacheco when he does return. And the other thing too is that the Chiefs are force feeding Kareem Hunt 20 plus touches per game right now. It doesn't seem likely to me that once Isaiah Pacheco comes back, that Kareem Hunt just disappears. Like, it's entirely possible that they create a little bit of a tandem. Pacheco is definitely going to be RB1 in the lead back, but I don't know if we should be expecting Pacheco to come back and just suddenly be instant workhorse running back right away. And even if he is, I don't know if we should be expecting the same type of efficiency. So there's a downgrade there to Isaiah Pacheco. Tyrone Tracy, love him. He's going to be a great. He's set up for a really great finish. Giants are on bye this week, so that wouldn't help you this week. He did also have a costly fumble in the last game, so it's fair to wonder if like he's in the doghouse and they turn back to Devin Singletary. But ultimately, it should be Tyrone Tracy down the. There's nothing wrong here with Tyrone Tracy. I'd like to have him. I just wouldn't want to trade Cooper Kupp and Breece Hall. I like Ladd McConkey too, but he's going to continue to be hit or miss in a Chargers offense that's not even throwing the ball 29 times per game. Like the Chargers don't want to throw the ball. We've seen 10 seasons of Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator, and the dude has never, ever finished better than ninth or lower than ninth in rushing attempts. Like, he wants to run the ball as much as possible. McConkey's going to have big games, but he's going to have plenty of duds too. I'm not trading those studs for the package that you're getting in return. All right. Aleko says, shout out Crazy Taco. Crazy Taco, man. So the love here is coming from our fantasy football Discord server. Dang it. I'm trying to show it right now, but I must have clicked the wrong screen share setting. But there's a good group of humans in our fantasy football Discord server. We got 200 plus fantasy football players in there just talking ball all day long. Good friendships that brew down there. We call it in the basement. So that's another one. If you're ever interested in joining our Discord server, head over to the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football Patreon. Right in the membership page, there's different tiers where you can join our Discord server. There's a basic tier that just gives you basic access. And then there's also the Ask Mikey Anything tier. So you'll get access to a private channel where you can ask me questions just like we're doing here today. Guys, this is less than a beer per month. Like, it's not overly expensive by any means, but yeah, we got Alekos in there. We got Crazy Tacos up in there. We got this guy, Mr. Derek Devereaux's in there. Lots of really, really good, great humans and sharp fantasy football players. It's an awesome, awesome place to hang out if you are a fantasy football player. All right. Derek says, I'm late to the party. I've been deciding if I'm a psychopath for wanting to play the Colts, Jets, and DFS when they'll end up with 8 turnovers. No, man. I mean, the idea with DFS is you got to do something different, right? So if everybody else is on, Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens, Steelers, and Seahawks, 49ers, and nobody's thinking about the Colts, Jets, give it a shot. I think there's plenty of shootout potential there. Like, if Anthony Richardson can do anything near his potential, if Aaron Rodgers, like, say what you will about him, but he does have some nice matchups coming up. Like, no reason to think Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson can't feast on this defense. I think there's plenty of upside to that game, man. I'd give it a shot. If there's anywhere to try it, it's DFS, baby. Like, you got to be different somewhere. Colts Jets is a great spot to give it a shot. Camden wants to know, start 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. Oh my God. I might have to do this one in email, Camden, because this might. Okay, well, Jamar Chase is in. I don't even remember who he plays, but he's in. Jonathan Taylor, they play. Who do the Colts? Oh my God, we were just talking about the Jets. Ooh. Kareem Hunt, J.K. Dobbins. I'll tell you what, Camden. Just for the sake of time, I will respond to this, but I'm going to respond via email, if you don't mind, or wherever you want. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I don't care. Anywhere. Give me 1 second. Jamar Chase is in for sure. I'm going to send you guys, I'm going to drop this in my link or in the comments real quick. If it loads, come on now. So this is my, oh shoot. This thing is in my way. Can't see anything. Copy link. All right, here we go. I am dropping a link to like my digital business card. So this is like my emails on there, all of my socials, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you hang out. Please hit me up with this question. And I promise I will go through my whole process and I will respond to you. I just don't want to do it all here just for the sake of time, because that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys to go through. So that's all. But again, shoot me an email. It's just Mike. I'll type it here real quick. Shoot me an email, Mikey@basementbroodff.com, or hit me up on any of my social media platforms, and I will answer that question. I promise. All right, let's keep moving though. Also, what do I do when Pacheco comes back with Hunt? I mean, you could already, wrong thing. You could already start to look to trade him if you want, but I think I would just stash him the same way that I'm stashing Jordan Mason, because there's going to be re-injury risk. You never know what can happen there. But if you want to try and sell high, now would be the time to trade Kareem Hunt. All right. Tanner hopping in. Tanner's on his way to a bachelor party, and he's sliding in the show to say, let's go, Mikey. Let's go. I appreciate you, buddy. So Tanner is the magician, by the way, that sets all of this up. He sets up the StreamYard. He trained me on Stream. Well, I shouldn't say that because it makes him look bad with how bad I was with StreamYard to start this. But he's the guy who's editing the podcast, cutting the podcast, creating shorts. Magician, absolute magician. And more than that, this dude is a great human. Connect with Tanner. It looks like he's commenting on Facebook. Send him a friend request on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. This dude's everywhere. He's helping me out. And if you can't find him, shoot me a note. I will definitely drop links. This dude's awesome. Be sure to connect with him here. Oh man, my boy Lane Taylor sliding in. I don't even know if you're still watching, dude. I see this comment is from 20 minutes ago. That's not too bad. Lane Taylor sliding in. J.K. Dobbins outlook for the rest of the year. I wouldn't panic about Gus Edwards coming in. J.K. Dobbins is health permitting. J.K. Dobbins should continue to be the guy the rest of the way. Gus Edwards has long been just a guy. Not that that's a bad thing, but for fantasy football purposes, he's not this like, they don't have like a Jonathan Brooks waiting in the wings. They have Kamani Vidal, but he was only going to come into the picture if Gus and Dobbins didn't work out. So they don't have like a Jonathan Brooks. They don't have anything like that waiting in the wings. I think Gus Edwards is going to frustrate us at times, but Dobbins still got, and I wrote this in the heat map. Where are we at? Where's Chargers? LAC. Oh, just got to go down. I wrote this in the heat map that Gus Edwards handled 10 touches for 55 yards in his return last week, but that did not stop J.K. Dobbins from getting 18 touches of his own. So we talked about it a little bit ago. Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, those guys are going to run the ball as much as they possibly can. And there's no reason to think that J.K. Dobbins won't be the number one option for that moving forward. If they run the ball 30 times, Dobbins is still going to get 20 of those carries. So I'd feel pretty good about him still for the rest of the year. He's very boomer bust. Like he scored 16 or more PPR points in 5 of 9 games, fewer than 10 points in 4 of 9 games. But you can also kind of predict when each is going to happen. In games the Chargers are going to play with a lead, they're going to be ahead. You should fire up J.K. Dobbins. In games like this week, where it could be a pass-heavy affair, it's a very narrow spread, 1.5 points against the Bengals. If the Bengals get out ahead of the Chargers and they need to throw the ball a little bit more, like games where we know the Chargers are going to run the ball, fire up J.K. Dobbins, and I'd still feel pretty good about him. All right, Justice Reborn popping in to say, hey, bro, back to you. Or sis. I don't know. Justice, I don't know. Hey, bro or sis. All right. Nick wants to know, I have been streaming between Kraft and Andrews so far. Okay. Someone dropped in Joku. Would you drop Kraft, Deontay, or Jordan Mason for him? And how much of my fab would you spend? Oh man, I don't really want to draft Tucker. Draft. I don't want to drop Tucker Kraft. Deontay Johnson actually took a step back last week in snap count. He played. It's going to be wild if I remember this off the top of my head. If I remember right, he played 30% of the offensive snaps in the first game with the Ravens, but just 6% of the offensive snaps last week. I don't think I got that right, but I'm going to look real quick because now I'm curious. Where is he? I suppose I could just do a little search to find him. Oh, he's up here. Baltimore. There he is. Dropped from 30%. So I got that one. Oh, 8%. So yeah, he played 30% of the offensive snaps in his first game down to 8% of the offensive snaps last week. Obviously, that's not going to stay the case. Like, dude, they traded for him for a reason. He's going to get involved in that offense. But Lamar Jackson is throwing the ball less than 29 times per game. Last time I checked. Oh, average right here. Yeah. He's throwing the ball less than 29 times per game. We know Zay Flowers is going to get his. Mark Andrews tends to be involved from time to time. Isaiah Likely is involved from time to time. Rashad Bateman is the most likely to suffer the arrival of Deontay Johnson. But man, it doesn't seem there's not really a world where I'm thinking that Deontay Johnson, like he's joining the best offense and he's playing with the best quarterback of his career. But is there going to be enough volume for him to do anything? Learning a new offense in the middle of the season? I don't think there's as much upside to Deontay Johnson with the Ravens as people think. I would have rather seen him stick with Andy Dalton, even though the Panthers moved on from that. I think if you're dropping one of these guys, I would rather drop Deontay. I don't want to drop Tucker Kraft in a situation where there's two trains of thought here. I don't want to carry more than one tight end in general, but David Njoku's not necessarily going to be I have to start him every single week. If you intend to start him every single week, you can drop both your tight ends. But if you're still planning on playing matchups, then I wouldn't necessarily want to drop Kraft. Jordan Mason is not somebody I want to drop because Christian McCaffrey is a high re-injury risk for the rest of the year. I don't love the idea of rostering 3 tight ends. I actually kind of hate that idea. But to me, there's not really a big reason to cling on to Deontay Johnson either. So I'd be fine with dropping Deontay or Kraft. I wouldn't drop Jordan Mason. As far as fab goes, I have no idea. The trick with the fab questions that I get from everybody is that I know nothing about your league. I don't know your budget. I don't know your league mates' spending tendencies. I don't know what the waiver wire looks like. I don't know how many players you have on your roster, how many of each position you start. All of those things matter when I'm calculating what percentage of my fab to spend. I will say that generally speaking, I'm excited about David Njoku moving forward, playing with a quarterback like Jameis, who is willing to fling it. What I don't like is that the Browns keep having to answer questions about who their starting quarterback is going to be. To me, like Jameis Winston should be locked in, but it sounds like the door is open for a new starting quarterback like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And if that happens, I want no part of any Cleveland Browns. But as long as it's Jameis, I feel good about David Njoku. Again, I don't think he's going to be this like surefire every week tight end one. They still got Jerry Jeudy. They got Cedric Tillman. Elijah Moore is getting plenty of targets, but I do feel good about David Njoku, where I do think he would be your best tight end if you were to land him. I wouldn't go crazy spending it all, but I would spend some on him. I don't know if that helps, but I do like him moving forward. Justice wants to know, need help this week. Full PPR start, 1 wide receiver and 1 flex. We got Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Romeo Doubs, Mike Williams, or Ray Davis. So I'm going to eliminate the last 2. You can't go with Mike Williams until we see him play more snaps. Like he had that cool touchdown last week, but that was literally his only target of the game. He played just 9 snaps last week. We need to see him playing full-time snaps before you can put him in your lineup. We have to see him play full, especially in Arthur Smith's offense. Like they don't want to throw the ball either. So he needs to be a full-time wide receiver to even be an option. Ray Davis doesn't get the ball when James Cook is alive and well, which is the case. Both of those guys are eliminated. So then it just comes down to Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Romeo Doubs. Jalen Waddle's one of those guys that we know it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point, but it's like, man, how much longer can we wait? I'm treating him as a high upside wide receiver 3 anytime he's on the football field, but this is a brutal matchup, and we'll talk about that in a second. Generally speaking, the Dolphins have a strong point total, 26 points. We're expecting the Dolphins to score plenty of points. Third most among all 28 teams on the slate. So we're expecting them to score more than 25 other teams this year. Plenty of touchdowns. Usually that's the type of upside you're looking for when making fantasy football decisions. Like, the Dolphins are a team you want exposure to in week 11. I have Devon Achane in the A column. Like, I think he's set up to absolutely explode this week. But generally speaking, we want exposure to the Miami Dolphins in week 11. Now, they are 7.5 point home favorites. That's a wide spread that suggests positive game script, plenty of rushing volume. If the Dolphins are trying to kill the clock in the second half, that's not a good thing for their pass catchers. It's not a death sentence, but it's not like the Dolphins are going to have to throw the ball 50 times here. Jalen Waddle is averaging just 10.2 PPR points per game in 4 full games with Tua, less than 5 targets, less than 4 catches. He scored an encouraging 16 PPR points in week 1, but fewer than 9 in each of the other 3 games. It's like, it just hasn't been happening. Same with Tyreek. It hasn't been happening. Tough matchup. Raiders are holding wide receivers with the 5th fewest PPR points per game, 7th fewest catches, 4th fewest yards, 11th fewest touchdowns. Just 8 wide receivers in 9 games have been able to reach even just 10 PPR points. So not even one wide receiver per game is getting to 10 points against the Raiders. That's wild. That's strong at the individual level. Only 2 in 9 games have been able to get to 15 PPR points. 0 wide receivers in the last 6 games were able to reach 14 PPR points against the Raiders. That includes wide receivers from the Rams, although not those wide receivers. The Rams, the Browns, the Broncos, the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. Zay Flowers, Deontay Johnson, and Ladd McConkey all did well against the Raiders, but Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton, George Pickens, even Jamar Chase all did not do so hot against the Raiders. This is a really tough matchup for a guy who's not doing much to begin with. But Romeo Doubs, he doesn't have a delicious matchup either. Packers, solid implied point total, not nearly as good as the Dolphins, but above average, 23.5, 5.5 point favorites. Just like Jalen Waddle, that's not a great thing. They're not going to have to throw the ball 50 times, theoretically. Romeo Doubs is doing better than Jalen Waddle, 12.2 PPR points per game. A bit boom or bust. He scored 17 to 20 PPR points in 2 of 5 games with Jordan Love, but fewer than 10 points in the other 3 games. Now, the Bears are absolutely suffocating wide receivers, holding them to the 2nd fewest PPR points per game, 2nd fewest catches, 6th fewest yards, 3rd fewest touchdowns per game. As good as the Raiders were, the Bears have been better. 7 wide receivers in 9 games have been able to reach even so much as 10 PPR points against the Bears. That's just 7 wide receivers in 9 games have scored 10 points. Just 10 points? That's wild. 4 wide receivers in 9 games have been able to reach 13 points. So not even half a wide receiver per game getting to 13 points. Nico Collins hit. He hits against everybody. Gabe Davis hit. That's weird. Terry McLaurin hit. Noah Brown hit. But Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Deontay Johnson, Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Marvin Harrison, and Demario Douglas all pooped the bed against the Chicago Bears. Whew. Not good. Last but not least, Mr. Jerry Jeudy. So, by the way, between Jalen Waddle and Jerry Jeudy, I'd be going with Jalen Waddle here. Higher implied point total, bigger, more of a chance of scoring a touchdown. And it's one of those things where it's like, we know there's going to be a big day coming at some point. As long as Tua is on the field, as long as Tyreek is on the field, as long as Waddle is on the field, at some point, Tyreek is going to go off, Waddle is going to go off. It's going to happen. Okay, so I'd be going, there's so much more upside to Jalen Waddle than Doubs. So Doubs is out. I shouldn't even say out. Now it's between Doubs and Jeudy. Waddle is in. Okay. So Judy, I'm approaching him as a perfectly fine wide receiver 4/flex. We've talked plenty about the Browns Saints game. There's nothing that's particularly scary or exciting about it. It's just a mediocre game. It's not a game to target. It's not a game to stay away from. It's just fine. Okay. Jerry Judy has caught 5 of 8 targets he caught 5 of 8 targets for 79 scoreless yards in his first game with Jameis. That was 12.9 PPR points. Not bad. And then he caught 7 of 11 targets for 73 scoreless yards in his second game with Jameis. So 14 points. So this guy is getting you about 13 PPR points per game with Jameis. Just 2 games, but still, he's got 19 targets in 2 games with Jameis Winston. That's not a bad sign by any means. We already talked a little bit about the Saints against wide receivers when we were talking about Cedric Tillman. They're an above average matchup, 10th most PPR points, 5th most catches, 5th most yards. They're bound for touchdown regression. The Saints have a decent implied total. In fact, it's right on par with the Packers. Packers have an implied total of 23. Saints have an implied point total of 23. So it's not like we're going to project Romeo Doubs for significantly more touchdowns than Jerry Jeudy. To me, Doubs is the odd man out here. I'd be going with Jalen Waddle because of the massive upside, Jerry Jeudy because of what he's already shown in the small amount of time that he's played with Jameis Winston. And Romeo Doubs' matchup is terrifying. Like, the Bears are absolutely brutal on wide receivers. So Mike Williams and Ray Davis are not options. Waddle is in. Jerry Jeudy's in. Romeo Doubs is out. Jordan says, Mikey and BBFF are in my starting lineup every week, CMC level. Oh, man. Pray for my Achilles, please. Scared me now. Now I'm not playing basketball tonight now because of that comment. Thanks, Jordan. Just kidding. I don't have basketball tonight. Saturday, though. Saturday morning. All right. Zane says, appreciate the insight, Mikey. Appreciate you, good sir. Alekos says, if I wasn't a Niners fan, I would accept Andrews and Jones for Kittle. That's what's keeping me on the fence. Oh, yes. My favorite fantasy leagues to play in are the ones where you can tell fandom influences fantasy football decisions. I will take advantage of that all day long, sir. Bro, I'm a Packers fan who absolutely loves Aaron Jones and my heart is bleeding with him playing for the Vikings. It's up there with Brett Favre playing for the Vikings. And I'm telling you to trade for him. Okay? So do the right thing. I never know what to do with the Ravens players due to the amount of options they have in Baltimore. Yeah, I mean, it's Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and then boom or bust for everybody else. Tyler Sperry says Dawson Knox or Hunter Henry. So we talked about Dawson Knox. I like Dawson Knox as a streamer. Hunter Henry is going to be a much safer, quote unquote. There's no such thing as safe in this fantasy football world that we live in, but he's safer. He's getting a lot of volume from Drake May. That offense is getting better and better, by the way. I have Hunter Henry in the yellow column with a green dot. That's a good sign. Means he's headed towards column B. I'm trading him as a solid tight end 2, solid streamer in week 11. This should be Patriots. The Patriots are 4.5 point underdogs. That's not a death sentence for them, but it is slightly negative game script. They might have to throw the ball. Hunter Henry's averaging 11 plus PPR points per game after 4 games with Drake May. He's getting almost 7 targets per game, 6.5 targets per game. He scored 12 or more PPR points in 3 out of 4 games that he's gone with Drake May, 5 or more targets in 3 out of 4 games. And he is on the positive touchdown regression cheat sheet down here. Okay. So like if you missed it earlier, wrong one. I have a touchdown regression cheat sheet that kind of helps identify mathematically who should have more touchdowns than they currently do. So who are more likely to score touchdowns when the regression hits. Okay. So Hunter Henry is definitely on that list. He has 40 catches and 428 yards, but he's only got 1 touchdown. He should have more. He should have at least 1 or 2 more touchdowns. He's on the list. Rams are a good matchup. 4 tight ends. They're allowing the 9th most PPR points per game, 10th most yards, 9th most touchdowns. 4 tight ends in 9 games have scored at least 11 PPR points per game against the Rams. Trey McBride, Tucker Kraft, Brock Bowers, Josh Oliver, all 4 of those guys hit against the Rams. Sam Laporta missed, but Dude is averaging less than 4 targets per game this year. Rest in peace, Sam Laporta. Cole Kmet missed, but that dude's averaging less than 3 targets per game this year. And Jonnu Smith is about as hit or miss as it gets in the Dolphins offense. So are these really even misses this year? It seems like they're hitting more than missing. So as much as I love Dawson Knox as a streamer, as a plug and play, I have nobody else. I'd be going with Hunter Henry here because I feel good. Hunter Henry's, he's approaching that like tight end 1 category. Okay. Fett wants to know, one flex, Brian Thomas, Javonte Williams, or Tyjae Spears. Brian Thomas is just kind of on my do not start list in general, just because it's not Trevor Lawrence, it's Mac Jones. Javonte Williams is not even an option. So Javonte Williams had, I already forgot the number. Javonte Williams had, where was it? 3 touches last week. Audric Estime had 14 touches. Until we see that change back, we cannot consider Javonte Williams in our lineups. Like it's possible the dude has 0 touches this week if they decide to go with Jaleel McLaughlin. So Javonte Williams is not an option, in my opinion. Then we got Tyjae Spears, the Tennessee Titans. So bottom line, Tyjae Spears is getting enough volume to at least warrant RB3/flex consideration, but he's just that. He's a last resort. I'd much rather keep him on my bench as a stash than somebody I'd put in my lineup. Vikings, Titans. Titans have a dangerously low implied total of 17.5 points. We're not expecting a lot of touchdowns there. Titans are 5.5 point underdogs, so they're theoretically going to be pressed into a pass-heavy game script. Theoretically, that should have been a good thing for Tyjae Spears, but it just hasn't been this year. He's only got 5 catches on 5 targets in 2 fully healthy games. So he's not even getting 3 targets per game. It's not like he's like this automatic PPR option that's getting a ton of catches. The Vikings are brutal on running backs. They're holding them to the 4th fewest PPR points per game, 2nd fewest touches, 2nd fewest scrimmage yards. They're brutal on the ground. They are somewhat 3rd fewest rushing yards, 5th fewest rushing touchdowns. They are somewhat vulnerable through the air, 13th most catches, 9th most receiving touchdowns. But other than that, I mean, just 5 running backs in 9 games have been able to reach 10 PPR points. It just they're tough there's nothing working in Tyjae Spears' favor. It's a tough matchup, terrible implied point total, tough spread. There's nothing that's good here. Whereas Brian Thomas, whereas I said, I don't want to start him this week. He at least has, don't get me wrong. I don't want any part of Mac Jones. Like a guy that is, I don't want any part of a guy that's catching passes from Mac Jones, but there's at least some optimism here. So in 22 games that Mac Jones and his wide receiver 1, Jacoby Myers, played together in 2021 and 2022, Myers did average 12.4 PPR points per game, including 8+ targets. Okay, so he is capable of supporting at least 1 wide receiver. And the Lions are miserable against wide receivers. They're hemorrhaging the 2nd most PPR points per game, including the most catches and 2nd most yards. They're holding wide receivers to the 8th fewest touchdowns. They're getting flooded. Oh yeah. So they're getting flooded with 16+ catches and 199 yards per game, but allowing less than 1 touchdown per game to wide receivers. Okay. So that the Lions defense is bound to be on the wrong side of touchdown regression sooner or later at the wide receiver level. 9 wide receivers in 9 games have scored 16 or more PPR points against the Lions, including 4 that scored 21 or more. Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Marvin Harrison, DK Metcalf, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, and John Mechie all hit against Detroit, while Mike Evans, Jordan Addison, Romeo Doubs, and Tank Dell are the notable names that missed. To me, I don't love Brian Thomas because I don't love Mac Jones, but to me, there's at least a path to upside here. And we know without Christian Kirk, they want to get Brian Thomas the ball. It's just a matter of can they get Brian Thomas the ball. To me, it's Brian Thomas, and that one doesn't feel particularly close. I'd feel like it's like a 75-25 Brian Thomas to Tyjae Spears. All right, y'all. This is going to be my last one because I am toast. I'm like losing my voice. I don't know if you guys can hear this. This is like, it's wild how much this takes out of you. Last one we got here, Joe Garcia. And before I read this one, the last thing I'll say, because this is the last one, if you have more questions, if you have more that you want me to chime in on, no guarantees, no promises, But send me an email, Mikey at basementbroodff.com. Or, like I said, hit me up on any of my social media platforms. Like I'm super active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Like it's all there. Feel free to send me a message. Feel free to send me an email. Again, no guarantees, but I promise I will try to reply to these messages when you send them. Last one, Joe Garcia. I have Bijan Robinson. Congratulations. You've won your fantasy football league. I have Kareem Hunt, Pacheco. So you're covered there on IR. Allen. I don't know which Allen. Braylon Allen? I'm guessing because we're talking running backs here. Braylon Allen, Tyler Algier, and Jordan Mason as handcuffs. I love it. Well, you don't need. I love that you have Jordan Mason in case something happens at Christian McCaffrey. I hope you don't actually have to use Tyler Algier. Wide receivers, you have Cooper Kupp, Marvin Harrison, Cedric Tillman, Mike Evans, Darnell Mooney. Man, good looking team here, bro. Would you drop Mason for Williams, so Mike Williams, or use David Njoku and Pitts in the flex? I would not drop Jordan Mason to get Mike Williams. If I were to drop any of those players, I would drop Algier because you're capping your own upside when you're hanging on to a handcuff as opposed to rostering. Think of it this way. If Bijan Robinson gets hurt, you're automatically downgrading at running back in Algier. Like, yes, okay, good that you still have him, but no matter which way you slice it, it's going to be a downgrade. Whereas if you're rostering Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again, which, by the way, he, according to Dr. Deepak Jonah, is a high re-injury risk for the rest of the year. And if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, now all of a sudden you have Bijan Robinson and you have Jordan Mason. That is how you maximize ceiling. That is how you maximize upside. I want to roster other people's handcuffs more than I want to roster my own handcuffs. I understand the safety behind rostering Tyler Algier, but if you're cutting one, I'm swinging for the fences. I want to hit a grand slam. I'm dropping Algier, hanging on to Mason, and if that injury strikes, bam, we are going through we are winning our league with Bijan Robinson plus Jordan Mason plus whatever the Chiefs do at running back. So if I'm dropping one of those guys, but I wouldn't drop any of those guys for Mike Williams specifically. Mike Williams, we need to see him getting full-time snaps before he's a legitimate fantasy football option. It's just not like he only played 9 snaps last week. It's just not. The other thing is Arthur Smith. If there's anything we know watching him coach the Falcons for all those years, is that he struggles to get one guy the football, let alone like we saw him with Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and neither guy did anything in Arthur Smith's offense. Now we have Arthur Smith's offense with the Steelers, and they have Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Cordell Patterson, who he loves. They've got George Pickens. And to be fair, they don't really have a strong second option. That's where Mike Williams comes in, but they do have Pat Freiermuth. The point is they're going to run the ball as much as possible. So in the short term, Mike Williams isn't even an option until he's playing full-time snaps. And then when he is playing full-time snaps, he's not going to be any better than a wide receiver 4/flex option most weeks. So I wouldn't drop the upside of Jordan Mason or Tyler Algier to get to Mike Williams. I would just ride with what you got, if that helps. So, all right. I said that was going to be the last one. This will be the last one. Brady, in a rebuild dynasty superflex league, would you send Josh Allen for Baker and 2 early first round 2025 picks? If you're planning on using one of those picks on a quarterback, then I don't see the point. But if you're trying to boost up at wide receiver or running back, man, oh man, like Baker, dude, I was texting my buddy Derek Devereaux the other day that I was straight up wrong about Baker Mayfield this year. I thought losing Dave Canales was going to hurt, and man, talk about a career revival. That dude is absolutely balling. Like he's right. I think he's averaging more fantasy points per game than Josh Allen is, if memory serves. Josh is getting 20.1. Baker's getting 20.9, despite not having Chris Godwin, Mike Evans for the last few games. So it's wild, man. I think that's a hell of a trade. I really do. Look, there's no part of me that wants to trade Josh Allen in a dynasty superflex. That's arguably like the guy. That's like 101, if not Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. You can make a case for those guys, but it's like you don't want to trade Josh Allen. But if you're going to trade Josh Allen in a dynasty superflex, the price is right. Baker Mayfield is still plenty young, by the way. Like if he can keep this up, assuming this isn't somehow a 2-year flash in the plan, right? You see guys who have this like 1-year career revival and then tail off again. That hasn't been Baker. He's gotten better and better and better. He's still young. 2 early first-round picks that you can use on running backs, wide receivers. I don't want to trade Josh Allen, but if I'm going to trade Josh Allen, the price is right. Oh, and he says, I have other quarterbacks. Would be using them for running backs, wide receiver. I had Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Brian Thomas, and DJ Moore at wide receiver. Lost 3 straight, so I feel I need to move. I sent Bowers and Andrews for Hopkins. I hope both make the trade worth it. You sent Brock Bowers for Andrews and Hopkins? I mean, yeah, if we can start seeing consistent production from DeAndre Hopkins, there's plenty of upside to that trade. I mean, there's a lot of covered upside that we haven't fully realized yet with Mark Andrews and DeAndre Hopkins. So if both of those guys can remove that veil, remove that cover, and start playing up to that potential, this will end up being a great trade. It's just time will tell. Like right now, it might not feel terrific because Brock Bowers is a lock at tight end. Mark Andrews is about as hit or miss as it gets as at tight end. DeAndre Hopkins has 1 great game and 1 dud with the Chiefs. But man, if things break right, there's a lot of upside here. Last one, Tyler Sperry. Sorry, I missed it. Henry or Knox Kincaid out. Oh yeah. We covered this one. I love Knox as a streamer, Tyler, but I'd go with Hunter Henry. Yep, we covered that one. I don't know, maybe 15 minutes ago. This was the fastest 2 hours. But all right, guys, we're gonna wrap it here. Like I said, if you have other questions, if you have anything else, no guarantees, but feel free to send me a email, basementbroodff, or Mikey at basementbroodff.com. No guarantees. I will do my best to reply to those. Just drop that in the chat for you. Otherwise, I also just dropped my virtual business card where you can hit me up on all my socials, Twitter, Instagram, like whatever, you name it, I'm on it, except for Blue Sky. I've never heard of that. That's a thing apparently that I learned about today. And then, like I mentioned, the heat map, you guys, this is something that it's my passion project. It's my baby. And it's the thing that led to me starting this whole business. Your support is so much more appreciated than I'll ever be able to put into words. Let me tell you something, guys, whether it's me or somebody else, when you support a small business, I promise you, you're making that person's day. Like I used to sell 6-figure contracts in the corporate world. And yet when I get a notification that somebody spent $4.99 on my heat map, I celebrate that with bigger enthusiasm than I ever celebrated 6-figure contracts, just because it's my baby, it's my passion project, it's my life's passion. So I appreciate you guys supporting me, supporting the show, supporting my creation, et cetera, et cetera. Again, week 11's heat map, everything that we looked at here, all of this information, that can be yours for just 1 beer, $4.99 per month. Or you can get the entire rest of the season all the way through the Super Bowl for $20.93, aka $1.90 per heat map for the rest of the way. That's on the Basement Brood Fantasy Football Patreon, specifically in the shop on my Patreon. I just dropped that link in the chat, in the comments as well. last but not least, if you missed this in the beginning of the show, I am currently doing everything I can to get the attention of the guys over at the Dan Patrick Show. They are coming to Wisconsin. They're coming to Green Bay for the NFL draft. And according to them, according to their own show, they are looking for a way to host their show while they're in Wisconsin. And I want to be that guy. I want to be that answer for them. So I'm doing everything I can to get their attention. If you have a quick minute and you can engage with this tweet that's on my X or whatever it's called, on my Twitter profile, on my X, like it, comment on it, engage with it, retweet it, whatever it is. I'm just trying to get their attention. So while you're over there, feel free to give me a follow. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyways, guys, I really appreciate you guys tuning into the show. If you have other questions, send me an email. I dropped that in the comments. Hit me up on any of my socials. I dropped my business card in the comments. Otherwise, scoop up the Week 11 heat map, make some of these decisions for yourself. And I guess that's going to do it. That's all I got. It's time for me to go grab another beer. Yeah, that's it for episode 46. I will see you guys next Friday. We're going to be back every Friday, noon Central, right here, Basement Brewed Fantasy Football YouTube channel. That's it for episode 46. Cheers. This brew's for you.